Chapter 81, Thorin's Pet Bilbo. When Bilbo opened his eyes, the first thing that reached him was a faint, pleasant scent of incense. He blinked up at a ceiling painted with elegant designs, nothing like the low, gray peak of his own tent. Where am I? He became aware of a soft, spacious bed beneath him, wrapped in a warm, pristine down coverlet and wearing the pajamas he had brought but never had a chance to put on. Bilbo, you're finally awake. Bofer's surprised voice came from the side of the bed, his felt-hatted head popping up over the mattress. Bofer tried to stand on tiptoe but could hardly be seen above his chest. Only then did Bilbo realize this was not a large bed at all, but a normal-sized bed for very tall folk. Where am I? How are Tarns, Gandalf, and Thorin? He asked. Bofer finally gave up on tiptoeing and pushed himself up with his hands. This is Rivendell. You lost consciousness with a fever and slept through a day and a night. If Tarnas hadn't held you steady with magic, you might not have made it this far. Thorin was much worried and told me to watch you here. As for Tarnas and Gandalf, don't fret. Those two wizards seem to be with that elf, Elrond. Oh, and I heard Mr. Bernal say that Tarnas and the others are meeting with other elves or wizards today. Wizards? Bilbo blinked, turning the words over. So we're in elf territory? Thorin actually agreed to come here? Bofer yawned. Well, you were ill, Master Bilbo. Now you're awake, I'll go tell Thorin and the others so they won't worry. Bilbo lifted a hand to stop him. No need. I'll get up and tell them myself. He tried to sit up but felt lightheaded and his limbs were weak. He sank back into the pillows. Bofer scooted over to help, gently tucking the coverlet around Bilbo. You're not well enough yet. I'll fetch something. You haven't eaten for a day. Have to fill your belly. He hopped down from the bed. Bilbo burrowed into the warmth and, comforted, nodded. If possible, a pork pie and some blueberry cheese. Bofer shrugged. I'll pass the message, though I don't know if those are proper for a patient. The door shut, and Bilbo was left alone. Small and quiet on the soft bed, he turned to the window. The river of stars above Rivendell poured into his view, countless lights like diamonds. The sight steadied his breath, his body relaxed, and a smile eased across his face. For a moment he forgot the wariness of the road. A sudden burst of voices broke the stillness as the dwarves barged in, bringing their boisterous cheer. I told you, our master burglar wouldn't collapse from a mere cold, Killy crowed, grinning when he saw Bilbo sit up. Balin nodded warmly. Gloin took up the tune. He's right. Our master burglar just needs a bit of physical training. Dwalin's voice rumbled. Leave it to me. I'll put Bilbo through training and make a proper warrior of him. Bilbo's eyes widened at the fierce-looking Dwalin, and he pointed at himself, shaking his head. Thank you. But really, I don't need training. I've hardly ever lifted a sword. Feely, bright as a little lion cub with golden braids, chimed in. You did well with the troll earlier. Your stone throwing was true. If you don't like swords, I'll teach you throwing knives. No. Really no need, Bilbo protested. It was beginning to sound like the refrain of his day. No, thank you. I don't need it. Stand aside. Master Bilbo's dinner, Bofer announced as he and his brothers Bifur and Bombur carried a low wooden table and white plates to the bedside. Bifur addressed Bilbo in Dwarvish with concern, but Bilbo could not follow the words. Bofer squeezed in, set the table on the coverlet, and with Bombur placed the warm plates. Bifur worries for you. There's no pork pie or fruit cheese, I'm afraid, but there's roasted meat, roast fish, and a vegetable salad. Only drink is water. He smiled, then swatted Bombur's hand away. Hey, Bombur, you'll not eat this too. It's Bilbo's. You've had enough. Didn't you see those elves staring as if they'd never seen food before? Keely whooped. I back Bombur. Eat them out of house and home. Those elves look like they've never seen proper food. Our Bombur's only getting started. Feely agreed, and the wine's as bad as dew. Enough. Give our patients some peace. Gandalf's aged voice came from the doorway, and he entered, followed by Tarns, who looked worried, and Thorin, silent and watchful. Thorin glanced at Bilbo briefly, then turned away, his face set and distant. The dwarves fell quiet at his arrival, and the room calmed. Didn't you hear Gandalf? Thorin said. Leave the burglar in peace. Go about your business. His words carried weight, and one by one the dwarves filed out. Bilbo breathed more easily. He did not dislike the dwarves at all. Their concern had often moved him, but at that moment their noise had been exhausting. He needed rest, not revelry. Tarnas, is there anywhere else that still aches? Tarnas asked. Bilbo rubbed his hands and looked at the steaming roast. My head's still a bit fuzzy, but I'm all right. Just hungry. For a hobbit, the greatest punishment is being limited to 1 meal a day. Tarn smiled. If you can joke, you're truly improved. When you fainted, you frightened us. Why aren't you wearing the pendant I gave you? Bilbo picked up a piece of roast. Beaufort had reheated it, and grimaced. I left the pendant at home. I didn't expect the cold and lack of rest would make me pass out. He chewed gratefully. The food soothed his stomach and made him feel better. Reading. I thought the danger of journeys lay only in wild beasts or snow. I thought I was prepared. I never thought about things like the strange winter here, or orcs that aren't fit to harm me, but keep us from sleeping. Gandalf smiled and finished the thought. A true journey teaches more than any book. Bilbo hummed his agreement and leaned back. Let me off for now. How did your talks with the elves go? It didn't seem smooth. Thorin looked off. Tarns noticed the glance at Thorin and shook his head. Not as bad as you think. Or rather, Thorin hasn't even started speaking with the elves yet. Why? Bilbo asked, genuinely puzzled. Gandalf stroked his beard. Lord Elrond has not yet returned. There have been orcs near Rivendell. He led his riders to clear them out. Lindir, who tends Rivendell for now, said Elrond might come back tonight, but it's late. He may not return until tomorrow. Rest easy. So Thorin's mood was tied to the elves, Bilbo thought, munching another mouthful. Just then there was a polite knocking at the door. A clear, gentle voice drifted through the crack. Lord Tarnans, Lord Gandalf, Lord Thorin, Lord Elrond has returned to Rivendell. Lord Lindir sent me to inform you. The room fell still. Tarnas's eyes brightened with surprise. Gandalf's hand went to his beard. Bemused, he had just told Bilbo Elrond might not return tonight. Thorin bowed his head, though his face was composed. A hint of displeasure flickered beneath his brows. Bilbo broke the silence. I'll finish my dinner then. Will you go meet Lord? Gandalf nodded, and after a quick look between Tarns and Thorin, Thorin followed him. Tarn stayed to give Bilbo a few more instructions before leaving. Outside the door, Thorin found Balin still waiting and said, Balin, come with me. Let us meet the Lord of Rivendell and hear what he has to say. Moonlight and starlight filtered down the valley, washing the elven pavilion in silver. The pavilion was fashioned of the lightest wood, carved with fine patterns and veiled in a filmy, crystal gossamer that trembled in the breeze. An elven warrior in armor was loosening his gauntlets. He turned and smiled, Elrond himself. He laid a golden sword on the stone table, touched his left breast, then made a forward wave of greeting. Ah, Mithrandir Tarnas, I am glad to see you. He paused and inclined his head to Thorin. I am also pleased to see the king of Durin's folk once more. Welcome, grandson of Thror, son of Thrain, Thorin Oakenshield, and you, son of Fundin, Balin. Tarns and Gandalf returned Elrond's gesture, an elven embrace made with a touch to the heart. Thorin and Balin did not. Thorin kept his expression, while Balin gave a small, kindly nod. Melanin, Lord Elrond, Gandalf said in Dwarvish. Elrond smiled and nodded back, then turned to Tarns with pleasure. He tapped the golden sword. Tarnas, that sword you gave me has been of much use. I thought it ornamental, but its hardness and edge surpassed my hopes. It sliced through the orcs' crude weapons and cut down many of them. If it served you well, I'm glad, Tarnas replied. Elrond's smile faded a little as he looked at Thorin and Balin. I returned late because I led my riders out to disperse a band of orcs that came from the south. It is very odd to find orcs so near Rivendell. Something or someone must be drawing them. That might be us, Gandalf said. Thorin stared at Elrond, his brow tight, and would not speak. Gandalf felt the awkwardness and tried another tack. Thorin, give Lord Elrond the map I gave you. He can read what is upon it. Thorin's reply chilled Gandalf. Our affairs have nothing to do with the elves. Gandalf rubbed his forehead, vexed. My heavens, Thorin, for pity's sake, just show him the map. Chapter 82, Moon Letters and the Principle of Recurrence. For heaven's sake, Thorin, for once just show him the map. Gandalf's voice, raw with exasperation at the dwarf's stubbornness, echoed through the pavilion. Even Elrond glanced over in surprise. For Gandalf to sound that upset, Thorin's refusal must be remarkable. Thorin, for his part, paled at the reproach, Refusing to show the map after coming so far would be improper. Still, when he set eyes on the elven lord, his pride flared. "It is an heirloom of my people," he said stiffly. "Its secrets belong to me." Balin nodded grimly. He was kinder than most dwarves, but he shared their distaste for elves and preferred to keep his feelings to himself. Gandalf huffed. "Enough of this dwarvish stubbornness. Your pride will be your undoing. The one standing before you can read this map. Give it to Lord Elrond." Elrond said nothing, merely watching Gandalf, Thorin, and Balin with the cool attention of an immortal being. Tarnis stood aside, silent, waiting for Thorin's answer. Thorin hesitated, then, much to Balin's surprise, reached inside his tunic, drew out the folded map, and stepped forward. "Thorin, no," Balin began, but Thorin raised a hand. He handed the map over reluctantly, keeping his glare fixed on Elrond as if daring him to touch it. Gandalf breathed a sigh of relief. Elrond took the map with polite composure and unrolled it. He studied it by the pale moonlight. At once his eyebrows rose, his eyes sharpened. "Erebor," he said. He recognized the place the map depicted. "Why have you come here with this?" he asked Thorin. Thorin had almost decided to lay everything bare, but Gandalf cut in, fending off the confession. Mostly an academic matter." Tarnis and Thorin stared, taken aback by the odd evasiveness. Gandalf continued, "Lord Elrond, these old things sometimes contain hidden writings." Elrond didn't reply directly. He turned the map in his hands, and under the moonlight spoke a name in a language Tarns did not know, Cirth Ithil. Gandalf's eyes widened. "Moon letters," he breathed aloud. "Of course, so easy to miss." Elrond murmured to himself, "Moon letters only show themselves by moonlight, and they must be read under the same moon phase as when they were written." Thorin asked sharply, "Then can you read them?" Elrond's face fell. He carefully rolled the map up and returned it to Thorin. Thorin looked at him, puzzled. Gandalf pressed, "Lord Elrond, what do you mean? Even you cannot read the moon letters?" Elrond sighed. "It is not that I cannot read them, but that the conditions are wrong. The writing was inscribed 200 years ago on Midsummer's Eve, beneath a crescent moon. The moonlight tonight is not the same. Fate has not favored you this time, Thorin." Gandalf murmured, "It's winter now. So we'd have to wait until next summer to read it?" "And the moon phase must match exactly," Elrond added. "Wait here that long? Impossible." Thorin barked, "By then I would have my people at the foot of the lonely mountain." Gandalf closed his eyes and frowned. "Without knowing what the map says, what will you do when you reach the mountain? Search every inch of it for a secret door? It's madness." Elrond's face softened. "There is, as far as my learning goes, no other way to read moon letters. But I do not pretend I know everything." He smiled faintly and turned to Tarns. "Why have you not thought to ask him?" Tarnis blinked at the sudden summons. "Me?" Elrond nodded. Tarnis shook his head. "No, surely not. I have never even heard of moon letters, and if you cannot read them now, how could I?" A thought struck him. He paused, then said, "Wait." Elrond's surprise turned to interest. "It seems our friend may have another way." Thorin, anxious, implored, "Please, Tarnis, this expedition is everything to me. I cannot spend half a year here." Tarns composed himself and spoke cautiously to Elrond. "You say moon letters require the same moon phase. Is that requirement a form of mimicry, an illusion that can be dispelled, or is it an intrinsic physical condition? Answer me truthfully." Elrond considered the question and replied gravely, "It is a kind of deliberate mimicry. The dwarf who set them would have wanted to hide them from casual prying. I am certain of that." Tarns breathed easier. "Then I can try." Elrond leaned forward, intrigued. "How do you propose to reveal moon letters out of season?" Tarns did not answer with words alone. A holy mark flared in his right hand, a faint golden glow that drew every eye. He did not speak of how deep his prayer could reach, for even dispelling divine mimicry might have sounded improbable, but he invoked the regression principle, one of the fundamental prayers of the Golden Order. "Thorin, place the map on the stone table," he said. Thorin complied. Tarns was wrapped in golden light so bright it was like daylight in the night. At his feet a huge triangular phantom of gold shimmered into being, brilliant and momentary, then ebbed away until only a warm afterglow lingered around him. "Thorin Oakenshield," Tarnis said solemnly, "you are not abandoned by fate. Ever since you met me, it has been at your side." Elrond, astonished, stepped to the table. The light faded from Tarnas, who stood a little nervous. "Well?" he asked. "Did it work? Has the mimicry been undone?" Elrond smiled and read aloud from the map in the ancient dwarvish script. It now says, "Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks, and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole." Blue letters glowed for a moment in the bottom right corner of the map. Balin nodded, as if he already knew the phrase. Thorin folded his arms and pondered the words. At that moment, a small voice from the stairwell spoke. "Durin's day. What is that?" Bilbo, moving with the silent lightness of a hobbit, clambered up the steps. Tarn started. It was not the first time he had not sensed the hobbit's approach. Bilbo, embarrassed, explained, "I felt better after supper and put the dishes away. Then I came to find you in Gandalf. I heard you here and didn't want to disturb." Balin smiled kindly and answered for the dwarves. "Durin's day marks the Dwarven New Year. On that day, the last autumn moon and the first winter sun are in the sky together." His face darkened. "Only Durin's day passed the day before yesterday. The next one is a year away." Thorin laughed, but it was the laugh of a man refusing to be crushed. "No, Balin, do not be discouraged. We still have almost a year to make our way to the mountain. Once we are at the Lonely Mountain, there will be time to find the place the map speaks of." He thanked Tarns warmly. "You have my thanks, Tarns. I do not know how I could have found the secret door without you." Balin, heartened by Thorin's resolve, quickly composed himself. "We must reach the location mentioned on the map in time for Durin's day. Only then can the door be opened." Bilbo, who had joined midway and only partly followed the conversation, was relieved to see Balin calm again and nodded to his traveling companions. Elrond carefully rolled the map and handed it back to Thorin. He looked at Tarns and Gandalf with an expression that mixed amusement and forewarning. "So this is your aim, to enter the Lonely Mountain?" Thorin returned the look with righteous firmness. "So what if it is?" Elrond regarded him, then said quietly, "Know that not all think it wise." Gandalf caught the implication but asked for clarity. "What do you mean?" Elrond turned, glancing out into the night as if seeing things the rest could not. "You are not the only steward of Middle-earth. Be patient here for a few days. Others of importance will come." As that suggestion hung in the air, the memory of the evening's miracle lingered. Tarn's prayer, the regression principle, had undone the mimicry concealing the moon letters. It had revealed the words, but nothing in that act had revealed where the keyhole would be hidden. The map's inscription directed the seeker to a moment and place, by a gray stone when the thrush knocks at sunset on Durin's day, yet the keyhole's precise location remained physically concealed. The moon letters, cloaked by magic, could be unveiled by dispelling that mimicry. The secret door's keyhole, however, was hidden in the world itself and would only be found by following the special method the map described. Chapter 83, The Human Boy Living in Rivendell. Perhaps it was because he had finally recovered from a serious illness, or perhaps the bed he had slept in the night before was simply supremely comfortable. Whatever the reason, Bilbo had enjoyed a rare, worry-free, and beautiful night's sleep. When he opened his eyes, the first thin ray of morning sunlight had just slipped through the window and was gently kissing his eyelids. Ah. Bilbo sat up, stretched contentedly, and let out a satisfied little sound. He put on the clothes the elves had washed while he was unconscious and set by his bedside. He sprang down from the bed, nearly 2/3 of his own height, and his furry, large feet sank into the soft carpet. Curious, he pushed the door open and stepped out. Morning sunlight filtered through the long, delicate windows, dappling the stone walls of the elven house. The air smelled faintly of pine. Vines curled around the stone pillars and statues, stirring softly in the light, as if whispering of years gone by. In the dim glow, the painted landscapes on the murals seemed almost alive. Lush forests, wandering streams, and distant mountains moved in silent procession across the stone. Bilbo's eyes widened. Because it had been night when he arrived, he hadn't noticed any of this before. He padded along the corridors like a curious child, peeking here and there. One mural in particular caught his attention. Unlike the peaceful landscapes, it depicted a real event, an armored human warrior holding aloft a broken white sword. He stood amid the bodies of his fallen comrades, facing a Dark Knight who raised a great war hammer. The Dark Knight, only the elves' brush could suggest anything so terrible, looked grotesque and fearsome. For a moment, Bilbo could almost hear the desperate shouts on that painted battlefield, the clashing of blades, the sharp ring of steel, the cry of pain. A small detail drew his eye, a flash of gold on the Dark Knight's finger. A ring? Bilbo glanced at the golden circle twice, then looked away. Opposite the mural stood a finely carved white statue of a human woman. Her face was serene and beautiful. The delicate lashes seemed almost to tremble with some old, silent story. Bilbo stood on tiptoe and saw that in the statue's stone hands lay a broken sword upon a square of pale blue satin. Though shattered, the fragments still caught the morning light and flashed with a cold gleam, as if the old honor of that blade survived. Satisfied he had seen enough of the house, Bilbo strolled out onto the stone paths. He passed a pavilion where water fell in a soft curtain, walked over moss-flecked paving, and came at last to a wide balcony. Surrounded by trees, he closed his eyes and breathed in deeply. Elrond, having finished his morning duties, noticed the hobbit and came up slowly. "Not with your companions?" he asked quietly. Bilbo started at the voice, then relaxed. He was not afraid of Elrond. Two other lords he had met, Tarnas and Thorin, were less formal. Tarnas often behaved like a friend, and Thorin would join in song when the dwarves were merry, so Bilbo's idea of lordly was a little vague. Besides, Elrond himself was gentle and wise, and Bilbo felt at ease in his presence. "The dwarves probably aren't up yet," Bilbo replied. "Tarnas and his friends, I don't know where they've gone. And as for Gandalf, well, I don't know what he's up to either." Elrond nodded and fell silent, his gaze going out over Rivendell. Bilbo looked too, but a thought nagged him, and he was not one to keep things inside. Perhaps he needed someone to confide in, and here was a kind and sensible listener. "Actually," he said in a low voice, "apart from Tarns and Gandalf, everyone else more or less thinks I shouldn't have come on this journey." "Is that so?" Elrond asked gently. Bilbo nodded. Elrond took a step closer. "I've heard hobbits are very adaptable," he said. "Really?" Bilbo brightened. Elrond smiled faintly and added, "And I've also heard they are very fond of the comforts of home." Bilbo's face showed a self-satisfied smile for a moment. Then he lowered his voice and, with a conspiratorial glance, muttered, "I've also heard it's not wise to seek advice from elves. Their answers are both yes and no." Elrond looked surprised for an instant, then gave a soft laugh. He laid a gentle hand on Bilbo's shoulder. "Bilbo Baggins, we would be very pleased for you to remain here for the rest of your life, if that is your wish." Then Elrond left as quietly as he had come, and Bilbo stood there, stunned. Clang! Clang! The sound of swords striking reached him from just outside the balcony. Bilbo followed the noise and found Tarns, dressed in plain but sturdy knight's armor, practicing swordplay with someone. Mr. Bernal and Ms. Millicent stood nearby with their arms crossed, watching. Old Mr. Egon was not present. The opponent Tarns sparred with was partly hidden behind green boughs, and Bilbo could not at once make out who it was. He tried to peer. When the figure came into view, Bilbo could hardly believe his eyes. It was a child. A little human boy, wearing child-sized armor, was handling a longsword meant for adults and sparring with Tarns. Bilbo hurried over with quick, eager steps. 1, 2, 1, 2. Very good, you're catching the rhythm fast. To use an adult sword so well at 7 or 8 years old, you must have trained a great deal. Who taught you? Tarnas sheathed his blade and stepped back, openly praising the boy. He had gotten up early for morning exercise and had invited Bernal and Millicent, both strict in their discipline, for a three-way spar. The boy, who had suddenly appeared, had asked politely if Tarns would teach him a move or two. At first, Tarnas thought it a passing fancy, but then he noticed the thick calluses on the child's palms, proof of long practice, and agreed. Millicent clapped softly. Bernal smiled and nodded. The boy removed his helmet. Dark, messy hair stuck to his forehead and sweat dampened his young face. He was clearly tired. After catching his breath, he sheathed his sword and made an elven sign of respect toward Tarns. "Thank you for your guidance, esteemed Mr. Tarns," he said politely. "My swordsmanship was taught to me by Lord Elrond and by his 2 sons, who are my elder brothers, Elrohir and Elredon." Bernal grinned. "A very polite lad. You've got talent and the right sort of body for it. What do you think, Tarnas? Shall I take him on?" Tarnas waved him off. Let him rest a while, Bernal. He's not feely or killy. He's still a child. Your methods would be too hard on him and might stunt his growth. But I want Uncle Bernal to teach me a few moves, and Sister Millicent too, the boy protested, fearing they would be sent away. Tarn smiled reassurance. Don't worry, I just mean rest for the moment. Elrond has told you the old saying about haste makes waste. He stopped, realizing he hadn't asked the boy's name. The boy answered immediately and politely. Estelle, sir. That is my name. Please forgive me for not saying it sooner. I was simply too excited when I saw your 3 techniques. Lord Elrond told me your names. Tarns nodded. All right, Estelle. How about some rest and then breakfast together? Estelle's gray eyes brightened with the eagerness of a child. Yes, I like Miravor best. It's very sweet. But Lord Elrond only lets me have a sip now and then. That is because the bodies of growing human children cannot yet bear the strength of Miravor, Elrond's voice said as he approached. Estelle's face went solemn at once. Good morning, Elrond. Tarnas raised a hand in greeting. And Bilbo, how are you feeling? Elrond looked behind him and, to his surprise, noticed Bilbo standing there. Bilbo had followed him without his being aware of it. Bilbo explained, I saw Tarns sparring with a human child, and I came to have a look. I'm feeling fine, Tarns. That's good, Tarnas said. Estelle, quick to be courteous, greeted Bilbo, who was barely taller than he was. Hello, Mr. Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo's curiosity overcame him. By the way, why is there a human child in Rivendell? Estelle's gray eyes dimmed. Elrond answered softly, his father fell fighting bravely against an orc attack. I took him in. Bilbo flushed and apologized at once. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. It's all right, Mr. Bilbo, Estelle said with a sensible smile. I understand. Elrond's face was fond as he stroked the boy's head. Then, turning to Tarns with a smile, he said, I had meant to introduce this child to you, Tarns. I did not expect you to meet first. Perhaps it was meant to be. Tarnas, would you be willing to take Estelle as your apprentice? Note 1. Estelle is Aragorn, though at this time Elrond has not told him his true name or lineage. Note 2. Miravor is a cordial brewed by the elves of Rivendell, a warm, fragrant drink that eases weariness and restores hope and strength. Chapter 84. Making a quick exit. Tarns fell silent for a moment while Elrond waited. Everyone assumed he would accept, even Bilbo, but his answer surprised them. My apologies, Elrond, but not for now, he said, shaking his head. Estelle's young face fell at the refusal. Elrond, however, only smiled at the words for now. Are you refusing because you have another expedition coming up? He asked. Tarnas nodded. Yes, the real enemy on that expedition is Smaug the dragon in the Lonely Mountain. I am confident I can face him, but a dragon cannot be underestimated. Until that matter is concluded, I won't have the time or energy to take on a pupil. He meant something more than the friendly sparring he'd just done with Estelle. Real instruction. What Fili and Kili had received in the Golden Wood, taught personally and patiently by Tarns, was what he offered. Elrond inclined his head. I hoped, once your expedition is over, you would take Estelle as your student. Estelle brightened at that and looked to Tarns with pleading eyes. Please, Teacher Tarnas, he said. Bernal chuckled. He's already calling you teacher. What do you say? If you won't, I'll take him. I taught Fili and Kili their battle skills, and this boy's talent seems even greater. He might even take up my mantle. Tarnas shot Bernal an irritated look. Give it 6 or 7 years. He's only a child now. He couldn't survive your methods. Estelle seized on the hope in Tarnas's tone. Does that mean you'll accept me as your student? Tarnas nodded. You are eager to call me teacher. You have talent and you train diligently. I see no reason to refuse. That's wonderful, Estelle cried, waving his hands. Elrond smiled faintly. Thank you, Tarnas. Rivendell will be in your debt. That remark drew surprised looks from Tarnas, Bernal, and Millicent. Evidently, the boy's status was more than simple, worth the Lord of Rivendell saying Rivendell owed a favor. Only Bilbo seemed unsurprised. He beamed at Estelle, genuinely glad the human boy would have such a teacher. He decided he should say something himself and ambled over. He put a hand in his pocket and offered, Would you like an apple? Estelle, a little bewildered, glanced at the hobbit, not sure why someone barely taller than he was would come bearing fruit. Bilbo's cheeks colored. He hurried to explain. Tarns is a good friend of mine, and since you'll be his student, I thought I ought to say hello. This is how hobbits greet each other. Then he produced a bright, shining apple from his coat pocket, the snack he'd asked the elves for the night before. Elrond patted Estelle's shoulder, encouraging him to accept it. Tarns added, Elrond, while I'm away on the expedition, you can send Estelle to my territory in advance. I'll write a letter to Nephili Lu and others to say that Estelle is under my tutelage so he can become accustomed to life there. Elrond agreed. A fine plan. I believe some of my kin dwell within your borders. He will have elven care there as well. He bent down to Estelle, who was already munching the apple, and asked, What do you think, Estelle? Estelle swallowed and answered, I'll follow you and teach your Tarns. I can look after myself. I will send my 2 sons with a troop of cavalry to escort him, Elrond told Tarnans. I entrust Estelle to your care while he is in your territory. Before Tarnans could respond, a booming voice interrupted. Why are you all gathered in this corner instead of enjoying breakfast? Gandalf? Elrond greeted, and Estelle, following his lord's lead, bowed respectfully. Gandalf turned toward Tarns. Tarnas, I've been looking for you. Tarnas stepped forward. For me? What's urgent? Gandalf led him away from the others and beckoned them to be excused. Tarnas's curiosity deepened. Once they were in a secluded gazebo, Gandalf made sure no one could overhear, especially not a certain stealthy hobbit, before speaking. I must leave Rivendell this evening, taking Thorin and your companions with me. Tarnas blinked. You mean you want me to lead Thorin and the dwarves away? I thought Elrond wanted us to wait a few days for a guest. Gandalf lowered his voice. The guest is the reason. I didn't sleep last night, and I am nearly certain the guest Lord Elrond awaits will be Saruman the White. Tarnas frowned. Saruman, but he's your colleague. Gandalf's expression turned grave. Yes, and our relations are strained. Elrond will be cautious about Thorin's expedition, Saruman even more so. He believes Middle-earth is secure now. Provoking a dragon seems reckless to him. If Saruman is present, he may persuade Elrond to halt the expedition. If we do not move the dwarves out before the meeting, they may be prevented from leaving. I see, Tarn said slowly. Wizards are not all alike then. As long as it's for the safety of Middle-earth, disagreements are necessary, Gandalf replied. Sometimes opposing voices are what keep us right. Should I wake Thorin now and explain? Tarnas asked. No need, Gandalf said. Thorin is awake. I've told him. The dwarves are packing. The moment is now. We leave tonight. Tarns hesitated. And you? Are you coming with us? Gandalf shook his head. I must remain to draw Saruman's attention. I also have something to show him, the sword Radagast the Brown gave me. It will remind Saruman that Middle-earth is not as safe as he assumes. I will follow you as quickly as I can. Tarns blinked at Gandalf's habit of speaking in riddles. You say you'll come after? What do you mean that it's a pity for me? Gandalf smiled wryly. If things were otherwise, I would have introduced you to Saruman and Lady Galadriel and invited you to join a meeting of the White Council. You have the strength and wisdom they would value, but duty calls me to stay. Tarns understood and smiled. Perhaps after the expedition I will meet them. Please send my regards. And before you leave, tell Estelle I must be away for a time. He is Elrond's human ward. Gandalf nodded. I will. Tarns added, and I will tell Bilbo too. He loves Rivendell and may need time to pack. That evening, on a mountain track beyond Rivendell, a shadow fell where the sun's last light could not reach. A company of dwarves, led by several humans and Tarns, appeared as if summoned from the dusk. Gloin stared at his hands in disbelief. This sorcery is amazing, Mr. Tarns, he breathed. Killy grinned. It wrapped us in darkness. The elves didn't even see us pass by. Keep your voices down, Thorin warned. We are not yet clear of Rivendell. If any patrolling elves hear us, Tarns's work will be wasted. Though Tarnas called it prayers and Fili and Kili had taught their kin the basics, the dwarves still called it sorcery out of habit. Tarnas had cast the two fingers prayer known as darkness, one of the rites favored by some who work in secret, to cloak them in concealment. As the night deepened, the cover allowed Bernal and the company, with Thorin's party, to slip away unseen. They planned to remain undiscovered until dinner, at least. They walked until the sun had nearly set. Thorin stood, surveyed the land carefully, and confirmed they had crossed Rivendell's borders. Be watchful, he said. We are entering the bounds of the great wilderness. Balin, you know the way. Lead on. Very well, Balin said, and took the front. At the rear, Bilbo lingered, his gaze fixed on the elven homestead receding behind them. The last light stained Rivendell's spires a golden red, illuminating the craftsmanship of the elves. Thorin noticed the hobbit's hesitation and called back, "Baggins, keep up." Bilbo turned, forced a smile, and hurried to catch up. Still, he stole one last, lingering look at Rivendell before he fully set his face to the road. Tarns, watching him, slowed and fell back to walk beside him. "What's the matter, Bilbo?" Tarns asked, so reluctant to leave. Bilbo put on a breezy air. "Oh, nothing. I was thinking of my pony left behind in the stables. We left in a hurry and couldn't fetch it. It's a silly thing to miss, perhaps." He hesitated, then sighed. "I like Rivendell. It's beautiful. I don't know when I'll have the chance to come back, and that makes me a bit sentimental." Tarns smiled. "When we return, we will come again. I promise you that, Bilbo." Bilbo brightened at the promise as they fell into step with the company, and the night closed around them. Chapter 85, Crossing the Mountains. After the council at Rivendell had broken up, Gandalf lingered behind. Lady Galadriel held him with a gentle, knowing attention. She was radiant, golden-haired, full of intellect and wisdom, and she asked him softly, "You will go with the dwarves who left early, won't you?" Gandalf inclined his head. "Yes." "You are right," Galadriel said approvingly. "Helping Thorin Oakenshield is the right thing to do." Then a shadow of worry crossed her face. "But I fear this expedition may stir forces we do not yet understand. The Morgul blade Radagast gave you, its mysteries must be unraveled, and that well-trained orc and warg force you spoke of, something moves in the shadows, eluding our sight, at least for now." Gandalf's expression grew serious. "I shall be careful." She stepped closer, speaking his elvish name. "Mithrandir, why did you choose that hobbit and that Lord of the Golden Tree?" Gandalf stopped and slowly turned. Moonlight lit the lines of his old face. An expression crossed it that neither Tarns nor Bilbo had ever seen. Confusion, almost wonder. "I do not know." Galadriel considered him. "Saruman believes that only great power can control evil, but what I have seen says otherwise. It is small things, the daily acts of ordinary folk, that check the spread of darkness, simple kindnesses, love." Gandalf smiled for reasons he could not explain, then spoke softly, as if answering himself. "Why Bilbo Baggins? Perhaps because I was afraid and he gave me courage." Galadriel had come close enough to take his rough hands. She soothed him quietly. "Do not be afraid, Mithrandir. You are not alone." Gandalf looked at her, gratitude plain in his eyes. She murmured in Elvish, "A boi liliathon, imtulathon." When he needed help, she would come. His shoulders eased. He bowed to her and began to withdraw. "Wait, Mithrandir," she called. "You told me why you chose the Hobbit. Why did you choose that Lord of the Golden Tree?" Gandalf paused, then smiled. "I did not choose him, Lady Galadriel. I cannot explain that." Galadriel's brow creased in puzzlement. Gandalf explained. "Tarnis had already agreed to Thorin Oakenshield's quest before I invited him. He was willing to help the dwarves reclaim the Lonely Mountain." Galadriel's understanding brightened her face. "So this is Thorin's destiny." "If I must answer," Gandalf said, "Bilbo is the source of my courage against darkness, and Tarns is the foundation of my confidence. Forgive me that I cannot introduce him to you now." Galadriel smiled faintly and shook her head. "It is all right. I have patience. I will meet your friend in time." Meanwhile, Tarnas and his company, with Thorin and his dwarves, Balin acting as guide, had set out south from Rivendell along the eastern edge of the Misty Mountains. Balin, who knew the passes, explained that they must reach the mountains near the Savage Lands. Only from there could they cross as safely as possible to the eastern side, then follow the river north, past the Gladden Fields, and at last enter Mirkwood. "This is the best route," Balin assured them. Gandalf and I agreed on it. "Don't worry, we needn't go all the way into the Savage Lands. That would be too far." The dwarves nodded, saying nothing about the nearer route through Moria. The bane of Durin and the horrors of the deep halls still haunted them. No one wanted to speak of it. A week had passed since their departure from Rivendell, and Gandalf had not caught up. Tarns thought of waiting, but Thorin grew impatient. If Gandalf wished to join them, he would do so. Gandalf's absence suggested he had tasks of his own. It would be better for them to press on. Tarns agreed. They walked another week along the mountain's edge. The weather was cold, but they had been spared orc attack. Perhaps Rivendell's patrols had broken the trail. Bilbo, taking to the hardships faster than anyone had expected, slept soundly on the rough ground, and no longer came to Tarns to complain about the lack of a soft bed. When the sun shone at midday, it gilded the misty peaks like scattering gold dust. One afternoon, as they passed another narrow flank that could have led into the heart of the Misty Mountains, Bilbo, seated on Torrate for a while's rest, asked with curiosity, "We've gone by many passes. Why don't we just go straight through the Misty Mountains?" Balin chuckled. "You can't go in there, Mr. Baggins. Many roads cross the Misty Mountains, and many passes lead through them, but most are false. Otherwise, why call them the Misty Mountains and not the Foggy Mountains?" Bilbo frowned thoughtfully. Balin went on, "Most of those passes are dead ends or traps, crawling with evil beasts and dangers. Even the road I know is not guaranteed safe. Who can say when some creature might take it? We can only hope the cold keeps most of them away in winter." Bilbo shivered. Tarns asked him with interest, "Balin, what do these dangerous creatures look like?" Balin grinned. "If I knew, Mr. Tarns, perhaps I wouldn't be in Bag End but in Mirkwood." Ori, who loved lore, said quietly, "I've heard a few things, mostly tales told by kin or written in old books." The dwarves leaned in. "Out with it, Ori," Killy urged. Ori adjusted his cloak. "Mostly it's orcs and trolls. But I once heard a dwarf in a tavern claim he saw eagles larger than elephants in the mountains. Worse, he said he saw something that terrified him, so that even after I bought him 3 large tankards, he could not steady his hands." "What was it?" Beaufort asked, half suspicious about his beer money. Beaver mumbled something in Dwarvish and earned a chorus of ribald responses. Ori pressed on more solemnly. "A rock giant. The man said there was a thunderstorm. The ground began to shake. He thought it was an earthquake, then saw 2 colossal figures of stone throwing boulders the size of houses at each other. When he woke, the sky was clear. The stones on the ground were the only proof it had happened." Tarns looked thoughtful. "So thunderstorm weather is a condition for their appearance?" "Perhaps," Ori admitted. "Or the dwarf was drunk and imagined it. I do not know." Bernal drifted closer and joked, "Could they be kin to those giant skeletons in the lands between?" Millicent shook her head. "I doubt it. Rock giants would be born of stone, not ash and flame. Giants of the lands between tend toward fire, but any giant is more dangerous than a dragon in some ways." Egon, who prized his great bow for hunting dragons, said, half eager, "I've never shot an arrow at a giant. If we meet one, I'd like to see how my bow fares." Bernal smiled. "I'd like that too. Maybe we can have a contest." Tarns gave him a wry look. "Why must you always make contests of danger? Suppose we plan sensibly for a giant attack." Bilbo listened from Torette's back, thinking that if giants were real, the sensible course was to run rather than to plan contests. Ori, seeing Tarnas and the others take the story so earnestly, added apologetically, "Take it as a tale. The dwarf might have been exaggerating." 2 days later, following Balin's lead, the company clambered onto a narrow, rugged track carved into the cliffs. They traversed a ridgeline and then came upon a path that ran perilously close to the cliff's lip. The weather turned. A thunderstorm blew up over the mountains. Bilbo, soaked through, wiped rain from his face. One hand clutched the rock wall, the other steadied him with the stout branch he used for a walking staff. The path was narrow and slick. A misstep would be fatal. "You said thunder brings rock giants," Bilbo called nervously as he stepped over a jutting stone. "Do you think we'll meet one now?" Only thunder answered. Then Dwalin's shout split the air. "Look out!" Far ahead, a tremendous rock hurtled down from the sky, smashing toward the very path they trod. Chapter 86. Please don't be too sleepy, because you're addicted to chatting with beautiful foreign cosplayers. I need to take a day off. I've been chatting with beautiful foreign cosplayers on Xiaohongshu, Little Red Book, for so long I haven't slept, so I can't write today. Please accept my leave of absence, bows. I'll make up today's update tomorrow. This is not a joke. It's real. I'm a cosplayer myself, and I ended up talking to quite a few foreigners. I even shared 2 of my own cosplay photos. What surprised me most was how amazed they were by our domestic cosplayers. They said we look like we walked out of a fantasy world. They were especially impressed that Chinese cosplayers can freely edit and post photos without being criticized, often receiving praise instead. That reaction stunned everyone in our group, and they kept asking why. The answer they gave was eye-opening. In many places, heavy retouching or makeup that changes skin tone can be criticized as racial insensitivity. For example, if a white person darkens their skin with makeup or Photoshop to play a dark-skinned character, they'll be criticized. Conversely, a black person lightening their skin to portray a fair-skinned character can also draw backlash. It sounds absurd, but it's true. They also pointed out a cultural difference in approach. Many of us in China prioritize restoring the character faithfully, aiming for a near 100% recreation, even if the result doesn't always read as the person underneath. Foreign cosplayers, by contrast, tend to emphasize themselves cosplaying a character. It's more about their own interpretation and identity in the cosplay. They were also envious of our wig industry. In China, there are specialist wig makers who produce high-quality wigs as props. Many foreign cosplayers just buy a basic wig and style it themselves, which can be time-consuming and a lot of labor. We kept talking until dawn. I promised to make up the update tomorrow. Chapter 86, Rock Giants. Look out! Dwalin's shout was raw and desperate over the storm. Rain sluiced into his mouth and he spat. Thorin saw a huge boulder arcing toward them and bellowed, "Tarns! Everyone, keep close to the wall. Watch for falling debris," Tarns shouted back. Facing a hill-sized rock hurtling through the air, he couldn't guarantee a flawless solution and feared for the dwarves' safety. "Egon, help!" Egon nodded, his expression grim. He had already unslung his dragon greatbow and fitted 2 harpoons carved from ancient dragon scale, aiming at the incoming mass. He didn't move immediately, though. He waited for Tarns. Against a quarry that size, those bolts alone would be hardly decisive. Egon trusted Tarns to buy the time they needed. The weapon in Tarns' hand shifted and became the Azog Glintstone's staff. Comet-like light burst from the staff and sliced the shadows from the canyon. An azure torrent flowed between the rock walls like a liquid galaxy, reflecting 100 stars. Boom. Under the onslaught of Comet Azure, the mountain-sized boulder split as if struck by a blade. The remaining halves roared like startled beasts and lunged for Thorin and the others. That was when Egon acted. Time seemed to slow, sound narrowed to the drum of his heartbeat. He drew the bowstring tight and let fly. The 2 bolts, longer than a grown dwarf, whistled through the air like lightning. In Thorin's panicked view, the arrows struck the 2 halves perfectly. The razor tips sank deep into stone until only the fletching showed. The impact altered their trajectories. The colossal rocks, howling, dropped from the sky and then, at the last instant, swung wide, brushing past the cliff and plunging into the bottomless ravine. The dull reverberation rolled through the valley. The dwarves stood on the cliff edge and held their breath, chests tight with the aftertaste of near death. Tarns didn't relax. He barked, "Keep moving! Don't stop!" Bilbo, pale with horror, pointed toward the direction the boulders had come from. "Oh my goodness! What is that?" Bofur, holding Bilbo to keep the hobbit from toppling, stared and murmured, incredulous. The legends were true. The storm clouds were black as ink. Lightning ripped and thunder rolled over them like a god's fury. Emerging from the gloom was a towering figure, its body pieced from great blocks of stone. Each step of the thing trembled through the canyon. It was vast in a way that stole the breath. The rock giants from old tales had returned. Tarns' first thought wasn't superstition, but strategy. How do you fight a creature this size? He had faced worse weather, and only something like a great ancient dragon rivaled this height, but this was an unfamiliar opponent. The lands between taught you to be wary of the unknown. More than anything, Tarns had to protect the dwarves. He also felt something odd about the rock giants, though he couldn't name it. Bernal, behind him, muttered, "With that bulk, my giant hunt battle skill will be useless." "Don't be ridiculous. That's practically a mountain. Not even that would help unless you had a mountain hunt," Tarns snapped. The dwarves hurried along the slick, narrow path, praying the giants hadn't marked them and that they could get clear. Balin, stroking his long white beard as he ran, shrugged at complaints. "How should I know? Ask the rock giants themselves." "I'm not asking a rock anything," Killy shot back. "Enough," Thorin snapped. "Listen to Tarns. Run, thump, thump. Footsteps echoed from the valley behind them. Millicent's urgent voice cut through the rain. Tarns, another rock giant is coming up behind us. Egon, who had been itching to fight, packed away his eagerness and ran. One of those monsters was bad. 2 was a death sentence. Tarns gripped Azor Glintstone's staff and felt the cerulean tear flask at his belt. The last Comet Azor had cost him half his magic. He had to be ready in case the giants threw more mountain-sized stones. Where was their core? What moved them? He ran through possibilities as the narrow path underfoot began to shudder. Stick to the rock wall. Hold on. Thorin shouted as the ground gave a violent jolt. The path broke in the middle. Quick reflexes kept none of them from toppling, but the party split. Thorin, Fili, Balin, Dwalin, Oin, and Gloin leaped to one side. The rest were stranded on the other. Kili, Thorin cried, turning. I'm fine. Tarnas is with us, came Kili's shout. Dwalin wiped rain from his face, feeling more tremors. It's too dangerous. There's an aftershock. We should help them jump across. Thorin felt a moment of relief, then fear struck again as the rock Kili and the others stood on began to rise. We're standing on the knee of a rock giant, Thorin realized and lunged for the narrow path. He couldn't see Kili. The standing giant's bulk blocked his view. A mountain-sized boulder hurled by the first rock giant smote the newly risen one in the knee. It had only just woken and couldn't dodge. It went off balance and collapsed on the cliff edge. Thorin's mind pictured Kili, Tarna's Bilbo, crushed and mangled beneath stone. He roared, No, Kili, Tarnis, Bilbo. Pebbles the size of heads flew as the second rock giant joined the fray. Dwalin held Thorin back and shouted over the rain to Balin, Get into the hollows, watch for flying stones. I order you to let go of me. Thorin fought the grip, frantic. I'm going back for them. No, Dwalin said, iron in his voice. Not while I still have arms to hold you. I won't watch you walk to your death. We'll go, Fili, you and I. Thorin swung, furious and helpless. Then a biting chill hit Thorin's wet cheek. Even in winter, it felt unnatural. Fili, hair stringing wet with rain, shouted with surprise and pointed at the spot where Kili had been. Look, Kili and the others, they're alive. Balin peered and exclaimed, By the gods, that's an ice storm. Where Kili and the others had stood, a white mist of frost swirled. The cold had frozen a rock giant's knee solid. Kili's voice carried back, wild. Rock the size of 2 dwarves or Bombur himself were jammed between cliff and giant, holding a space open above Bilbo and the others. Thick ice had formed, locking stone to stone and saving them from being smashed. Kili knelt, clutching the claw-mark seal. Behind him, Tarns crouched, staff driven into the rock, pouring out an ice storm. The effect came from both Kili's desperate prayers, Gurang's rock, and the glintstone magic Tarns was channeling, Samir's ice storm. Together, they created a fragile, miraculous refuge. Quick, move, Kili, now, Tarnas urged, his tones strained. The rock giant's strength was terrifying. He had to keep his casting posture and sustain the magic, or the ice would shatter and the cliff and the stone would give. Kili nodded and pushed to his feet, but when he released his prayer, the rock above trembled and cracked. Tarns poured more power into the spell, and the freezing mist thickened, holding the stone in place. No, Teacher Tarnas, I have to stay. Kili began, but his limbs failed. The exertion of the prayers had drained him. He slumped to the path, exhausted. Take him, Tarnas snapped. Bofur and Bifur grabbed Kili under the arms and flung him across to Thorin's side. They jumped after him. Bernal seized Bilbo by the waist as he tried to look back and hauled him to safety. Egon landed on the same ledge, and Millicent, knife drawn, turned back. She wanted to try cutting off a rock giant's knee with her battle skill to protect Tarnis. Don't worry about me, Millicent, Tarnis called, but he didn't let her go. He yanked his staff free from the stone and blew the spirit steed whistle. Torite snorted and reared. Tarnis leapt onto its saddle. The magically sustained ice disintegrated without his power, but Torrete's bound took Tarns to Thorin's side before the giants could act. The wounded rock giant that had been frozen looked bewildered for a moment. Then it stood and raised its fists at its companions, as if to strike them. If rock giants had minds, they might have wondered why they'd been stopped at all. Instead, the pair began to fight each other, trading blows and sending fragments scattering. Tarns exhaled, relieved. Thorin watched as the fighting giants staggered and slowly walked away, distracted by each other and the battle, drifting out of the canyon. What happened? Why are they moving off? Thorin asked. Tarnis gave a tired sigh. If I'm right, they never even noticed us. Thorin stared at Tarns in bewilderment. Tarns noticed and pointed toward the three rock giants still trampling the distant slopes. From the start, when I saw that one throwing stones at us, something felt wrong, he said. I couldn't sense any hostility from it. Maybe that's because it's made of stone, Thorin replied. You couldn't feel anything through its flesh. Tarns shrugged. Maybe. Hostility is an odd thing to sense anyway. But did you see how the giant that threw the stones behaved? When it got close, it didn't try to kill us. It punched the other giants that came up behind it. Bernal agreed. He's right, and we were walking on the knee of a rock giant. If it had meant to kill us then, Tarns and I might have been all right, but Keely and the others. Thorin fell silent. Bilbo, curious, piped up. But why throw rocks at us at all, Mr. Tarnis? Tarnis was quiet for a moment. I don't think the rock was aimed at us. Remember, we were standing on a rock giant. I reckon that boulder was meant for it. Bilbo's mouth twitched. Then why would one rock giant throw a terrifying boulder at another? For us, a rock the size of a small hill is deadly. For them, it's probably like a pillow, Tarns said. I've never seen a pillow that hard, Thorin grumbled. You've also never seen rocks with arms and legs, Tarnis replied lightly. He fell silent a beat and then asked, The rain's still heavy. Balin, how far until we're out of the Misty Mountains? Balin wiped his face, squinted at the lightning-streaked path beyond the cave mouths, and answered loudly, I don't know. Those giants have churned the whole landscape. I can't tell if the rain will let up before we make it out of this ravine. Then let's find a cave and shelter, Thorin decided at once. We'll rest here tonight. If it's still raining in the morning, we'll wait until it stops. Tarns nodded. Bilbo mumbled, What if the cave is a rock giant's mouth? Thorin's eyes flashed. Bilbo shrank back. I mean, what if? If that's the case, Thorin said faintly, I expect you, Master Burglar, to parley with it and ask it not to close while we sleep. Bilbo shut his mouth promptly. The company checked their packs, made sure nothing important had been lost in the scramble, and moved into the cave. Though the giants were far off now, Bilbo's joke had everyone seeing sleeping giants in every boulder. They moved cautiously until Fili, Keely, and Dwalin scouted ahead. Dwalin had his axe out before Thorin finished speaking. Fili and Keely plunged into the gloom, and Keely's head soon popped out. It's safe inside, he called. No signs of beasts. Looks uninhabited. Relieved, the company filed in. As the last dwarf was about to enter, Thorin halted Tarns and asked the question Bilbo had asked earlier. How would Gandalf find them? If he keeps falling behind, I won't stop to wait for him, Thorin said. Tarns repeated what he'd told Bilbo. Trust Gandalf. He's a powerful wizard. He'll find us. Good, Thorin said. I feared that if he tried to follow our path, those three playful giants might finish him off. Inside, the cave was dusty but dry. The dwarves hung up wet cloaks and packs on crags, then collapsed on the ground. Even the hardy dwarves were exhausted. Bilbo's numb feet did not stop him from enduring in silence. Bofur didn't lie down right away. He hauled Bilbo over, helped him take off his pack, and sat down beside him. Thank you, Bilbo mumbled, catching his breath. Bofur waved a hand and grinned weakly. Don't mention it. Thorin scanned the cave and frowned at the sodden company. You're all still wet. No argument. You'll freeze if you lie like this. Fili, Keely, make a fire. Fili and Keely groaned and rose. Where they'd been sitting, they left dwarfish puddles. Fili looked around in dismay. There's nothing here but stone. We can't find firewood. Shall we burn our clothes? And our tinder's soaked, Keely added. We might not be able to light it. Thorin's face tightened. He glanced at Tarns as if hoping for a miracle. Tarns smiled and stepped forward. He rummaged in his pack and with a few quick motions produced lengths of cut rope, several gray-black mushrooms oozing a sticky liquid, and a small, fluttering insect that threw off sparks when it beat its wings. The dwarves watched in silence as Tarns wrapped the rope around the fungus, making several torches, then set the insects on them. The sticky mushrooms burst into a bright, steady flame. The smell was sharp and resinous, but the heat was immediate and welcome. What is that? Bilbo asked, warming his hands. Viscous mushrooms, Tarns said. They're full of a fuel-like juice. They burn a long time. Under the fire's glow, the exhausted company drifted into sleep. Bilbo fell asleep quickly amid the dwarves' booming snores. Thorin stayed awake, sitting near the cave mouth, keeping watch over the storm. Eventually, Tarns came and leaned close. "Go rest," he said softly. "Egon will take the watch." Thorin hesitated, then nodded and lay down. Tarns, Bernal, and Millicent, however, moved deeper into the cave. Fili, Kili, and Dwalin only glanced at the entrance, Tarnis told Thorin. "There's another passage that opens on the side. I want to see where it leads, just in case." "What if there are traps?" Thorin said. "A narrow passage could hide mechanisms." Tarnis tapped a black stone shard in his hand and the withered branch tied to it. "This will trigger anything first," he said. He set the piece, a thing he'd bought from a traveling merchant named Patches, on the ground. Its faint golden runes were called Margit's shackles, and Tarns had discovered they could affect hidden mechanisms, traps, and invisible doors. Thorin didn't ask where Tarnis had found such an odd tool. Millicent, lithe and eager, suggested she go first. "I'm smaller than you two," she said. "I'll have more room to move." Tarnis smiled at her confidence. He placed the shackle and waited. A ripple of gold shimmered briefly, but nothing obvious happened. "There don't seem to be traps," he said. "Still, Millicent, be careful." She started to move forward when a grinding sound began somewhere beneath the cave. The floor under the sleeping dwarves cracked and slipped open like a trapdoor. Screams tore through the sleep. The platform split away and the dwarves fell. Thorin, who slept lightly, was jolted awake by the tremor. He lunged for Bilbo and shoved him clear of the opening. The hobbit woke bewildered. Egon, quick and alert, had his great bow in hand even while on watch. He loosed an arrow through the collar and cloak of one of the falling dwarves, pinning him to the steep stone wall of the newly exposed shaft. But as Egon took another arrow, the pinned dwarf slid free and tumbled down out of sight. "I'm going with them," Egon cried, and without another word slid down the pit, clinging to the slick stone. Everyone stared at Tarns. He looked sheepish, then put the shackle away. "I didn't know there was a hidden mechanism under our beds," he said awkwardly. A voice called up from the depths, Ori's, frightened and small. "Mr. Tarns, can you pull me up? I don't think my clothes can hold me." Tarns' expression sharpened. He moved to the edge of the pit, and as if the trap had nothing to do with him, said, "Hold on, I'll get you out." Ori was hauled up first. The thin, small dwarf, almost as slight as Bilbo, peered into the pit with lingering fear, then turned to Tarns, helplessness in his eyes. "What about Thorin and the others?" he asked. Bilbo, now fully understanding, spoke up anxiously. "Shouldn't we go down and look for them? Is there another way into that pit?" Tarnas cast the glintstone spell. A cool, steady light spilled down, revealing the interior of the chasm. It wasn't a natural sinkhole, but a man-made tunnel. Not far below, they could make out iron torch brackets and a narrow passageway, clearly made for smaller creatures. The torches were unlit, but the architecture left no doubt. Ori's eyes widened. "I remember this kind of passage. Only goblins build like this. This isn't a pit trap. It's a tunnel into a goblin lair. The place we were resting was the exit gate for them." Tarnis felt a small weight lift from his shoulders. He'd opened that gate earlier with a tool he normally used to test traps. Telling Ori the truth would have been awkward. Still, a passage was better than a hidden snare. At worst, Thorin and the others would have been roughed up rather than killed. Bilbo cocked his head. "Goblins. What are they?" Ori answered patiently. "They're a kind of orc, smaller than the orcs we've seen before. About our size, dwarves and hobbits. Call them goblins or orcs, same sort." Bernal stepped forward, practical. "Then how do we split up? We don't know the interior. This open gate is the only exit we know. Someone needs to hold it so the goblins don't shut it behind themselves." Tarns considered the people gathered, Bernal, Millicent, Bilbo, Ori, then made the obvious choice. "Bernal, take Bilbo and Ori to guard the gate. Millicent and I will go down this passage and try to find Egon, Thorin, and the others." Bilbo nodded eagerly and drew the elven short sword he'd taken from the trolls. "No problem. Gandalf said this sword will glow blue when there are orcs nearby. Perfect for guarding the gate." "That will help," Bernal agreed. "We'll know if anyone's lurking in the dark." Ori was happy to stay. Fighting wasn't his talent. Tarnis handed Margit's shackles to Bernal. "If the door closes again, use this to open it," he said. Then, with starlight to steady them, He and Millicent slipped into the narrow tunnel. Tarns had another shackle himself, so he wasn't worried about losing one. Tarn stepped back a pace, spread his arms, and caught Millicent as she dropped down the shaft. He released her waist and gave Bernal an okay gesture from below. "I'll go first. My back's in your hands," he told Millicent. "No enemy will get past the blade I carry," she promised, earnest. Tarns canceled the glintstone light and produced 2 wads of white soft cotton from his spatial pack. He handed one to Millicent. Soft cotton, it stuck to the soles of the feet, muffling landings and reducing fall damage. Since the goblins who dug the passage hadn't noticed such things, Tarns wanted to make as little noise as possible. Millicent affixed the cotton to her soles and followed him silently. They crept forward until Tarns froze and signaled her to stop. He changed his grip to a slender misericord and moved low and slow toward a small, hunched creature with pale skin and only a filthy loincloth. Its body was mottled with raw, ugly sores. Apart from size and skin, it looked much like the orcs Tarns had seen. Sly, cruel eyes, sharp teeth. It was a goblin. The creature was facing away, distracted by some noise below. Tarnes covered its mouth with one hand and drove the misericord through its spine with the other. The goblin went slack, twitching once. Tarns pulled the dagger free, laid the corpse gently on the stone, and took out the dexterity collector to harvest the soul. He waved for Millicent to come, and she arrived a beat late, wiping black blood from the curved blade of her prosthetic arm. "There was another behind us I hadn't noticed," she murmured. "It was asleep. I dealt with it." Tarns cursed himself quietly. Bad habit, fixating on the front and missing the flanks. Millicent smiled. "That's why I'm here." They moved on more carefully. Tarns guessed the goblin they'd killed had been drawn by the commotion when Thorin and the others fell in, which explained why it wasn't watching the tunnel entrance. The passage suddenly opened into a vast cavern. Torches dotted the rock like a shaken lantern, their flames revealing jagged stone and crude suspension bridges strung between ledges. Goblins swarmed across those bridges, streaming toward a single point. Short, ugly, with glittering malice in their eyes, they clutched rough weapons and chattered in a guttural tongue. Their shrieks and laughter echoed like a tide of knives. Any normal person would have felt paralyzed with dread. Tarns and Millicent tightened their grips and kept moving. Millicent peered at the teeming masses. "How many are there?" Tarnes shook his head. The goblins were making so much noise, they no longer needed to lower their voices. "Too many to count. Whatever happened, Thorin and the others must have made quite a racket to draw them. All these goblins look unusually furious." Tarns pointed toward where the stream of goblins was converging. A faint, distant roar like a dragon's could be heard. Millicent guessed. Maybe Egon and the others killed someone important to them. "Possibly," Tarnis said. "We have to help. There are simply too many for Egon to handle alone, even if he uses the Dragon Communion incantation. Once his magic runs out, they'll overwhelm him." They pressed forward, careful on the narrow paths, until a rising clatter and a chorus of dwarf voices burst through the underground dark ahead. Screams, a sliding rush, then a tumble as several figures crashed onto a broad ledge. The dwarves had fallen in and landed on a flatter slab of rock. Bomber, the fattest, came down last and flattened the others beneath him. Groans and curses followed. Beaufort struggled, telling Bomber he should lose weight, but went slack at the sight of Egon, who had dropped in separately and was working his way down the rock face to join them. Beaufort flipped aside with a grunt when Egon landed nearby. An arrow thudded into the spot where Beaufort had just been a heartbeat before, skittering sparks off the stone before plunging into the abyss. Thorin sprang to his feet and roared, "Weapons!" Goblins poured up through cracks and climbed the rock walls. Egon drew his bow, loosed an arrow that split the charging line, and scanned the fallen ledge. "We can't hold here. If we stay, we'll be surrounded. We must move." Thorin, breathless, rallied the dwarves. They ran, hacking and bashing at goblins that leapt onto them. Balin swung his sword like a bludgeon, each blow felling a goblin as if it were wheat in a scythe's path. Dwalin charged like a battering ram, slamming creatures off the rock into the abyss. But for every goblin they felled, more swarmed into the gaps. The dwarves were bone-tired from the rock giants. Their reserves were thin. Guts and stubbornness were keeping them upright. Egon pointed clearly to the largest outcrop in the cavern. "There!" he shouted. "There must be their leader on that rock. Kill the leader, and the rest will falter." Thorin gritted his teeth and pushed toward the highest stone. On it sat a monstrous goblin, fat as a troll, clutching a ram-headed staff. It saw the intruders and bellowed, cackling. "Look who's fallen into my halls. Dwarves and a human. Hand them over alive. There's a bounty on one of these dwarves' heads. Bring them to me, Thorin Oakenshield." The fat goblin's bloated body began to sway as it sang, and an ugly band of goblins clanged scrap metal in accompaniment. "Crash! Crash! Straight into my manor!" they mocked, chorusing as Thorin and the others came nearer. The Goblin King pointed its staff and crowed, "Capture them! Kill the human archer!" Something cold and sharp struck the Goblin King's chest. Its staff clattered from its grasp. The bloated figure sagged. It stared down to find an arrow buried in its heart, lips parting as life ebbed. The king opened its mouth as if to speak, but another arrow thudded in. Egon lowered the great dragon-hunting bow and surveyed the stunned horde. "Your leader is dead," he called. "Those who don't want to die, run!" For a second, the dwarves froze, panting. Kili wiped his brow and asked, voice small, "Are we safe?" The cavern answered with a sudden, furious roar as the goblins erupted into noise, shrieks, and wild clattering that drowned out thoughts. Fili swallowed hard. "I think they're angrier now." Thorin, exhausted but seeing no chance to stand his ground, threw up an arm and bellowed, "Keep running!" Chapter 90. Why run? "Aren't these them a kind of orc? Why are they chasing us even harder after we killed their king?" Kili panted, on the verge of collapse as he ran. Fili ran beside him, equally breathless, but corrected him. "I should point out, it wasn't us who killed him. Mr. Egon did." Kili rolled his eyes, or maybe he simply didn't have the energy to keep them open. "Why argue about that now?" Thorin, after felling 2 charging goblins with his frozen shell axe, snapped impatiently, "Both of you, shut up and save your strength." All the dwarves looked wrecked, but even Bomber kept moving, squeezing out the last of his reserves. They knew that if they stopped, the horde would tear them apart. It should have been simple. When a captain falls, the rest scatter. Why had this swarm gone berserk when their king died? No one had time to speculate. They kept running. Egon watched a growing wall of goblins ahead and barked, "Cover your ears!" The dwarves immediately remembered the trick he'd used before in the old forest. They stopped and clapped their hands over their ears. A soul-shaking roar, Egon's dragon communion, burst from where he stood. Goblins caught by the blast were stunned and fell into the abyss below. Those closer had their innards and minds shattered. "Keep moving," Thorin yelled when a large gap opened in the encirclement. Balin, tiring, gasped, "Running. This isn't a solution. We need rest." "I know," Thorin gritted out, "but—" A dazzling white light like another sun flared from a rock ahead of them. A violent gust followed, as if the whole underground kingdom had been filled with blinding radiance and a savage wind. Goblins were blinded by the light and knocked senseless. Others were swept off ledges into chasms. Egon pushed past the dwarves and hunkered at the front, using his body to shelter them, but soon realized the light and wind were not directed at their group. As suddenly as it had appeared, the phenomenon faded, torches had been blown out, and the caverns fell into near darkness. Shapes moved in the gloom. Using the dying glow of the torches, Egon made out a man with 2 swords and breathed a relieved laugh. "Ha! Tarnaz's friend, Gandalf!" A cheer went up among the dwarves. "Gandalf! We're saved!" "Can we rest now?" one of them asked hopefully. "Sleep here for a bit. This isn't so bad," another muttered. Bernal's voice came from behind Gandalf. "And me, Egon? I brought Bilbo and Ori. Are you all right?" Egon nodded, then shook his head. "I'm fine, but the dwarves are near exhaustion. They must rest or they'll die." Bernal frowned. "Where are Tarns and Millicent? They weren't with you?" Egon looked puzzled. "We fell in and were chased from then on. We didn't see them." Bernal's expression grew stranger. "They followed the same way. They jumped in to find you. Unless we can't go back the way we came." Thorin drew a couple of deep breaths and asked, "Gandalf, Bernal, how did you get here?" Bilbo, cautiously poking the unconscious goblins with his elvish short sword, peered from behind Gandalf's cloak and volunteered. "Not long after Mr. Tarns and Miss Millicent left, we ran into Gandalf at the cave entrance. I wanted to call Tarns back, but then a loud noise drowned our voices." He glanced at Gandalf. Gandalf said he knew a shortcut and led us deeper. We found a narrow passage, and once we were through, we saw you all being chased. Gandalf took over, eyes grave. We saw you kill the Goblin King, 3 arrows, I believe, and the entire underground kingdom went mad. I led Bernal and the others through the shortcut to get ahead of you. Fortunately, your attack drew enough attention that there were no guards on our path. Egon shrugged. I didn't expect that fat, bloated thing to stand still and sing while I shot him. I felt I owed him the courtesy of accuracy. Gandalf let the remark pass. Has anyone seen Tarns and Millicent? The exhausted dwarves, collapsed on the rock, shook their heads. Gandalf frowned. Bernal sighed, offering a plan. Gandalf, you take Bilbo and the dwarves for the exit you know. Egon and I will search back the way they fled. A voice nearby cut in. No need. I'm right here, and Millicent is too. They looked around in the gloom, but saw no one. Bilbo scratched his head. Did Mr. Tarns turn invisible? A pile of knocked-out goblins stirred. Tarns sprang up from among them and helped Millicent climb out. He drew a lungful of fresher air, trying to shake the stench from his nostrils, then scolded Gandalf lightly. You blew a whole lot of goblins down here with a spell. You almost buried Millicent and me alive. Gandalf chuckled. As long as you're both whole. Let's move. On the way, I heard Bilbo and Ori mention you'd met rock giants. Those are not easy foes. Thorin looked at his comrades, flattened, preferring to lie among the unconscious goblins rather than get up, and pleaded. Tarnas, Gandalf, can we rest a bit? Fili and Kili haven't had real rest since this morning. Excuse me, Bilbo interjected. He drew the elven dagger from his waist, and the blade shone with a cold blue light. He blinked, and Gandalf's face turned serious. The sword's glowing. Gandalf, you said that means... That means goblins are nearby, Gandalf finished gravely. Lights, torches, and the shadows they cast appeared on the sloping rock wall above. Bernal whistled and drew his greatsword. Looks like more guests. Don't be reckless, Bernal, Gandalf warned. There are tens of thousands of them. Their king's death has set them all against us. Bernal shrugged. An endless fight, then. We've faced worse. The dwarves tried to stand, but their bodies refused after so much exertion. Fili and Kili attempted to use the prayer, Wild Beast Vitality, to restore themselves. Their strength, however, was too low. The prayer failed for lack of reserves. From somewhere deep in the chasm, Bilbo heard a faint rustle and peered over. His face drained. There are goblins down there, too. They're moving up. We have to do something. Thorin leaned and recoiled. Bilbo was right. Torchlight burned from the chasm below. Tarns must have come that way. Thorin glanced at him. Tarnas nodded. Golden light spread from his hand, and the grace of the golden tree flowed through them. Fatigue left the dwarves like mist. Vigor and strength returned. Gandalf looked at the path ahead. I know of another exit. Follow me. They began to follow Gandalf. Bilbo watched Tarns hesitate and shouted, We need to go now, Tarnies. Tarns broke his reverie. Millicent asked, What were you thinking just now? Tarns stared at the soul collector in his hand, a deep blue source stone the size of his forearm, pulsing faintly with captured souls. He sighed. Selin gave me this. Gandalf's glintstone blast just now took many goblin souls, and I caught as many as I could. The collector filled quickly. Many souls couldn't be gathered. He put the collector away and motioned for Millicent to move. He figured he'd ask Master Selin to upgrade the device, or make spares, once they were home. He watched the fallen goblins, thinking about the power Gandalf had shown. Glintstone magic of that scale set off alarm bells in Tarns's mind. Why did Gandalf run if he could cast such devastating spells? Was it a matter of toll? Of magic cost? Tarns wondered. A sudden shudder ran through the suspension bridge beneath them. Bilbo screamed. Bilbo! Tarns! Miss Millicent! The dwarves called out in panic. Beneath the bridge, the pale-skinned goblins swarmed, hacking at the ropes and wooden anchor stakes. They were frantic to bring the bridge down, even at the cost of trampling each other, because once it collapsed, the pursuers above could be cut off. Bilbo had slipped and fallen into the mass below. He clung to his elven dagger and a brass knife, swinging wildly. He'd fought them off so far, but he was being pushed toward a sheer drop into a bottomless void. Tarns didn't hesitate. He leapt down and cut a path with his greatsword, severing all goblins that closed on Bilbo. Black blood and gore spattered the stones. Millicent followed, her curved scythe flashing as she cleaved any pouncer to pieces. Just as they touched down, the bridge collapsed where they had stood, the wreckage crashing onto a few goblins before plunging into the abyss. The dwarves had already run to another rock platform. They were safe. Bilbo had been held up by his fighting. He had fallen because Tarns hadn't left immediately, and now they'd both be behind. Tarns and Millicent worked quickly to clear the area. Tarns called up to Gandalf and the others, "Keep going. Don't worry about us. We'll find a way up." Gandalf's voice floated back down. "No need to come up. The exit is below. Run toward the sunlight and the wind. We'll meet you underneath." "Okay," Tarnis shouted. He clapped Bilbo on the back, calming the trembling hobbit. "All right, Bilbo, don't be nervous. Next I'll show you what a real adventure feels like." Chapter 91. Fate is Destined. Bilbo's eye twitched as he watched the unending stream of goblins charge forward, only to be cleaved in two by a sweeping greatsword. Time had lost meaning in the vast, torchless cave. Half an hour or a few minutes could have passed. He couldn't tell. Beyond the torchlight, the darkness swallowed everything. Across from him, Tarns was the raw force of the group, brutal, efficient, every swing reaping lives. Beside Tarns moved Millicent, the woman with the prosthetic arm. Where Tarns was violence, Millicent was grace. She danced through the goblins with a sword in a way that made Bilbo forget his earlier worries about her limb. He had assumed a prosthetic would slow her down, that she, slender compared to the others and missing an arm, would need extra help on the expedition. He had even been putting a bit more on her plate at meals. Now, watching her, he realized his concern had been misplaced. If anyone needed looking after, it was him. "Tarnis," someone shouted. "Don't just stand there, Bilbo. Keep moving. Gandalf and the others are waiting." Bilbo blinked and hurried to keep pace behind Tarnis. They reached the bottom of a deep ravine. Goblin corpses littered the ground, fallen from the heights above until the valley floor was almost buried. Bilbo craned his neck and saw more goblins still pouring down the path they'd come. He swallowed. "I don't think I'll ever forget this," he murmured, and hurried on with his head bent. Tarns had swapped his greatsword for a longsword. The floor of the ravine narrowed into a path where a greatsword might catch in the rock. Even if Tarns could smash through with brute force, it would waste energy. He spotted a shaft of sunlight and called out, "Look, there's light and fresh air. That must be the exit Gandalf mentioned. Let's go." The goblins shrieked and surged. Tarns saw the exit path was narrow, only wide enough for one person at a time. He grabbed Bilbo, lifted him, and tossed him into the passage. "You go first with Bilbo," he told Millicent. "I'll hold them off." Millicent nodded and slipped ahead. Bilbo hit the soft flesh of large, mushroom-like fungi and rolled to his feet unhurt. As he stood up, he noticed something glinting on the ground, a small golden ring. He picked it up, curious, when Millicent's shout cut through his thoughts. "Move! Bilbo! Watch out!" An Orcish goblin had sprung from a dark corner and lunged at him. Millicent planted her hand against the wall, stepped between them, and with a flying kick sent the creature tumbling. Bilbo's skin crawled at the terrible stench that had almost filled his nostrils. Had Millicent not intervened, he pictured the goblin biting his nose off. The kick should have been fatal, and yet the goblin did not immediately die. It muttered, half-conscious, "Thief, thief, give me my precious back." Bilbo's hand closed around a fist-sized stone. When the goblin rose on unsteady legs to lunge again, Bilbo threw. The stone struck the creature's forehead true. Its legs kicked, then it fell silent. Millicent shoved the body aside and hurried Bilbo toward the light. As they passed the fallen thing, Bilbo had a sudden, uneasy thought. Its gaunt, pallid face looked oddly like a hobbit's, someone who'd never seen daylight in ages. He immediately dismissed it. Hobbits liked the sun. Precious, he thought. Was that what the creature meant? The ring in his pocket grew cold at his fingers. Should he hand it back? He was about to pull it out when a muffled roar behind them threw him forward. Tarns burst out of the smoke, coughing and covered in dust. His ghostly white wolf war ghost armor was streaked with goblin ichor and gray with dust. "Don't stop!" he barked. "I threw some fire flasks at the mouth of the passage to buy us time, but I misjudged their power. I almost brought the whole entrance down. The flames and rubble might have blocked the way. Come on, while they're stalled. Get out." Bilbo shoved the ring back into his pocket and ran. Millicent had already reached the entrance and called over her shoulder, relaxed now. "It's safe outside. Mr. Bernal, Gandalf, and Thorin are all here waiting." 10 minutes earlier, down by the deep pool of the Goblin Underground, a pale, huddled figure squinted into the dim water. He had been starving for days, dragging himself along the pond's edge in the hope of catching a fat, sluggish fish. He was called Gollum because of the wet, coughing sound he made. Gollum, Gollum, until no one remembered a name older than his habit. "If it's fish," he whispered to himself, stomach rumbling, "sweet fish meat or the fat, anything to fill us." His voice shifted and hissed, suddenly fiercer. "We could be bold, pick up a stone, sneak on a goblin, crack its skull, weeks' worth of food." Then the tone went timid. "But they're fierce. The meats, it's stinky." "You're just frightened, and we have our precious. Put it on. Those filthy goblins won't see us." Yes, we have our precious." He drew a filthy, indistinguishable golden ring from his ragged pocket and gazed at it as if it were a sun. Then a thunder of sound from above made him tuck the ring away and press himself flat like a gray fox. Whole crowds of goblins began to fall, bodies crashing down, sometimes timber and broken walkway with them. Gollum peered out. A feast, he thought. He crept forward, hungry eyes fixed on the bodies. The caravan of searchers, an old gray-robed man with a long staff, a band of dwarves, and 2 human men, passed by too close for him to strike. He watched them with desperate patience. When they'd gone, he crawled out humming a mad little song and dragged 2 goblin corpses toward the narrow passage. As he shuffled, the ring in his pocket worked loose and rolled free. Gollum froze, panic twisting his face. "No, where is it?" He scampered forward, eyes wild, then a clear voice rang out from the mouth of the passage. "Bilbo, run, don't look back." Gollum snapped his head up. Someone had been left behind. He hesitated, glanced at the bodies, and made a choice, grab them and flee through the passage. As he slipped past the fungi, the ring rolled out onto the soft ground and stopped, half hidden in the mushroom flesh. Peering from his hiding place, Gollum watched the young hobbit tumble into the passage, stand, and, shockingly, pick up the glittering ring and slip it into his pocket. "Mine! My precious!" Gollum shrieked, a face contorting so badly it might have passed for an orc's. Millicent's boot came like lightning. She kicked him clean out, and he fell in a daze. "Robber, give me back my precious," he whimpered. A stone struck his forehead, Bilbo's desperate throw, perhaps, and Gollum went utterly still. Dust and debris rolled out of the cave as the entrance partially collapsed behind them. Gandalf's voice, relieved, carried across the ruined ground. "Millicent, Bilbo, thank the stars, you're all out." Gandalf's brows tightened as he watched Bilbo. The hobbit was not his usual cheerful self. Every few steps, Bilbo looked back into the darkness, and one hand never left the pocket that held the ring, fingers fumbling as if to feel its shape. Thorin hurried forward in a few brisk strides, embraced Tarns with a gruff relief, and then spoke, worried and oddly affectionate. "I thought you were lost. If you died down there because of me, I'd raise a dwarven host and flatten this place after we returned to the lonely mountain." Bilbo, cheeks flushed and awkward, pulled his hand from his pocket and gave a small sniff. "Thorin, thank you for pulling me to safety." Thorin waved him off without a word, instead asking aloud, "How did that door open?" When I fell, the goblins on those rock faces were astonished. Bernal, Millicent, and Egon all looked toward Tarns. Tarnas's face shifted behind the faceplate of his white wolf ghost armor. He cleared his throat and, matching Thorin's concern, replied, "Let's rest here for now. You're all exhausted. Don't press on. We'll travel again at first light." Chapter 92. The Influence of the Ring Gore. That night the dwarves slept soundly, everyone except Bilbo. He had drifted off for a while, only to be jerked awake by a nightmare. He sat up in his tent, heart pounding, and after a few moments began quietly packing his things. Dirty clothes, leftover food, even the rug he'd been sleeping on. Everything except the tent itself. With his pack shouldered, he peered out. Once he was sure the dwarves, especially Bofur, who often kept an eye on him, and Gandalf were fast asleep, he slipped out. The campfire's glow kept prowling beasts and night things at bay. Bernal, on watch, was the first to notice movement near Bilbo's tent, though the dwarves' tents partly blocked his view. He elbowed Tarns, who'd already been looking in that direction. "What's wrong with our hobbit?" Bernal murmured. Tarnis frowned. He seems to be packing, trying to leave the camp. I don't know why. Bernal chuckled softly. Maybe he's had enough of the road. Not that he can't bear the hardships, but perhaps he can't stand feeling useless in the company. Tarns thought a moment. I'll go talk to him. Gandalf says we're already on the far side of the Misty Mountains. If Bilbo tries to go back alone, he won't cross safely. Bernal shrugged. Do as you like. If he insists on quitting, he can't simply turn back. This place is closed off. You collapse the cave exit. Anyone wanting to return must find another way through the mountains. All right, I'll take the watch, Bernal said as Tarns pushed off his silver shoulder guard and walked toward where Bilbo had gone. Bilbo had not gone far. The wilderness beyond the camp was a black, empty space. He could hardly see his hand before his face. Every step stirred the rustling of grass and branches, like snakes sliding or night insects moving in the trees. Wolves howled in the distance, their cries rising and falling and tightening the knot of fear in his chest. He froze, listening, trying to judge where the sounds came from, but a nameless dread spread through him. He felt small, timid, and reached on instinct into his pocket for the golden ring. The moment his fingers closed on it, the fear eased. The darkness seemed less menacing, and he fancied he could see shapes in the night. He was about to take another step when Tarns's voice came from behind him. If you're too afraid to be alone, I can walk with you, he said. Oh, Tarns. Relief flooded Bilbo, and the courage the ring had given him vanished as soon as he realized he'd been discovered. He drew his hand back from his pocket, awkward and embarrassed. How did you get here? Tarns didn't use any glintstone magic. He had a lantern with him and hung it at his belt. Warm orange light spilled over them. I saw you packing. What's wrong, Bilbo? Why would you leave the company? He cleared a broken stone and sat, patting the ground beside him for Bilbo. Bilbo sat down, hugging his knees, unsure where to begin. It's all right, Tarns said gently. Take your time. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. You know what I said. If you felt you couldn't go on, I'd respect that. But we should wait until we're somewhere safe. If you decide to head back, Bernal will escort you. Bilbo hesitated. I'm not ill or tired, he smiled wanly. To be honest, you've all been very good to me, the dwarves especially. The books said dwarves were stubborn and gruff, but Thorin and the others have been kind and thoughtful. I heard Bofur say Thorin originally refused to go to Rivendell. No amount of urging would sway him, but we all know how that turned out, he shrugged. I truly like this company. You, Gandalf, the dwarves. I like you all. It's because I care that I think I should leave. Tarns listened, then asked, Why? Bilbo gave a rueful smile. Because I feel useless. In Rivendell, I caught a cold and fainted during that orc attack. We were delayed. Today in the goblin tunnels, Thorin shoved me out of the way and saved me, and I was slow to react. On the rope bridge, I didn't hold on. I fell and made you and Miss Millicent come down to help me. I've contributed nothing worthwhile. Maybe I should go back to Bag End, stop chasing adventures, and live a comfortable, ordinary life. 7 meals a day, my own bed, books, and peace. I'm not one of those epic heroes. If Middle-earth were a book, I'd be a passerby whose name doesn't even get listed. He sighed and felt lighter for saying it, then glanced at Tarns, anxious the words would seem melodramatic. Tarns answered softly, I know how you feel, Bilbo, but I don't think that's right. Bilbo blinked. Tarns continued, You're not as useless as you think. In the old forest, you were the first to notice the Hworn among the trees. At the troll battle, if you hadn't helped, Fili and Kili would have had a harder time. And on the road, without the food you made, the dwarves would have lived on cold rations, not the warm meals you cook. Their songs and stories are possible because you kept them fed. But that's just food any hobbit can make, Bilbo protested. It isn't anything special. It's just food boiled over a fire with seasoning. Tarns smiled. Any hobbit could do it, but where are those hobbits you're thinking of? Hobbiton, Bilbo said. Then, as the meaning sank in, he admitted, I know you're just being kind, claiming I do things only I can do. I understand. Still, it feels like I'm dragging you down. No hobbit back home ever sees elves or orcs, or the kind of glintstone magic you and Gandalf can wield. I don't belong out here. Tarns said nothing for a moment. Why no dwarves? He asked curiously. Bilbo was taken aback. He'd expected some lofty reply, not that question, and his mood shifted from self-pity to exasperation. Because dwarf merchants come to Hobbiton sometimes. They bring tools, food, kitchenware, often weapons too, though people don't usually buy the weapons. Why not the weapons? Tarnas pressed. Because Hobbiton's safe. There's no need for them. Do you feel happier for having had these experiences? Tarns asked. Of course, Bilbo replied without thinking. Then he froze and grinned helplessly. Tarnas, I suppose this isn't very coherent advice from you. Tarnas nodded. I'm not good with words. Sometimes I envy people who can speak like you. If I had half your way with words, maybe more friends would have stayed. He paused, then said, You want to leave out of a sense of responsibility. You want to contribute, but think you don't, so you feel you're failing and want to walk away. Bilbo raised his hand. Wait, if I had that sense of responsibility, I wouldn't have crept out in the night without telling anyone. Tarnes shrugged. I told you, I'm not good at talking. Bilbo laughed and stood, dusting himself off. The conversation had eased something in him. Talking with you helped. I don't feel the urge to leave as strongly. Let's go back before Gandalf and the dwarves wake. It would be awkward if they knew I'd slipped off at night. They started back. Bilbo reached into his pocket and said casually, Oh, Tarns, I found something following you and Ms. Millicent in that cave. Can you look at it for me? Don't show it. The voice flared in the depths of his mind the instant his hand touched the ring. Bilbo's face went blank for a heartbeat. Tarns was walking ahead and didn't notice. Of course, Bilbo. What is it? Tarns asked. Absolutely don't show it. Bilbo jerked his hand away and collected himself. Oh, it's just my courage. When the goblins chased us, I wasn't as paralyzed as before. Tarns turned with a gentle smile. Of course, my brave Bilbo. Relieved by the smile, Bilbo let his recent days pass. Then Tarns suddenly stopped and Bilbo tensed, resisting the urge to slip his hand back into his pocket. You said we should return before Gandalf wakes everyone, Tarns said, but that's unlikely. The dwarves are asleep, but Gandalf isn't. He noticed you leaving and meant to follow, but when he saw me coming after you, he held back. Tarns stepped aside to reveal Gandalf standing silently a little way from the camp's edge. Gandalf! Bilbo hung his head, ashamed. Running off in the middle of the night had been foolish. The last thing he'd wanted was to make Tarns and Gandalf worry. Gandalf only shook his head and said softly, It's good you've come back. I was worried you might meet danger outside the camp. His concern made Bilbo feel even guiltier. Tarnas patted his shoulder. Go rest, Bilbo. Don't overthink it. If you don't sleep now, you'll be tired tomorrow. About 2 weeks later, Thorin and his company reached a medium-sized human settlement. Note, in the original tale, Thorin's company was pursued by goblins after leaving the cave. In the film, Azog immediately pursues them because he was informed. In this version, the cave was deliberately collapsed and the Goblin King was struck down by Egon's 3 arrows, so he had no time to send word. As a result, neither a goblin horde nor Azog comes after them. Even if Azog had known their whereabouts, he would not have dared approach. The wizard had already dealt with an elite force, and rushing in would have been suicide. For those reasons, Gandalf did not summon the Great Eagles. Chapter 93. Even Wizards Have to Pay. Tarns and Thorin's company didn't just stock up on 3 months' worth of dried rations and drinking water at the small human settlement, they also bought more than a dozen horses. It was lucky the dwarves were content with ponies, otherwise the village might not have been able to supply Thorin's demand. This isn't Lohan, honored guests, the horse trader warned when he saw Thorin trying to buy so many animals at once. If you want first-rate mounts, head farther south. You'll reach Lohan's lands in about a month. As a merchant, he read people well. The sight of dwarves accompanied by a wizard and 2 knights in shining armor was unusual enough to tell him these were no ordinary travelers. Thorin said little and had the horses readied. Tarns and his group, who had already gathered what they needed, had been waiting at a small grove outside the settlement. The place had no inn, and few outsiders ever stayed. Thorin, Fili, Kili, and Dwalin brought the horses. Balin, with Ori, Dori, and Nori, handled the rations. When they all met back at the grove, Tarns and his companions had been waiting some time. Millicent and I asked around, Tarnas reported. It's not far from Lohan. If we go south a bit, we'll come to Fangorn Forest. We didn't expect to veer so far off course after leaving the Goblin Underground Kingdom. It'll probably take us longer than we planned to reach Mirkwood. Thorin's face was composed as he inclined his head. Lohan? No matter. We have time. Gandalf fell silent for a moment, stroking his long beard. Before we go to Mirkwood, I must take my leave for a while, he said. There was an outburst of surprise from the dwarves, Tarns and Bilbo included. Thorin raised a hand to quiet them. May we hear your reason, Gandalf? Gandalf didn't try to hide it. I can't tell you everything, but enough. Do you remember Radagast? The Brown? Of course, Thorin answered. He gave you something, didn't he? Gandalf smiled. He did. He gave me a dangerous blade. It came from Dol Guldur, the place said to be occupied by a necromancer. Dol Guldur lies not far from Fangorn, so it's near here. I intend to go and see for myself. Take care, Thorin said quietly. Are you going alone? Tarnas asked. Do you need help? Bernal can go with you. Gandalf shook his head, smiling. I have found aid. One of them is Lord Elrond. The others are Lady Galadriel and Saruman the White. I will use glintstone magic to call them and wait until they arrive before entering. Only then did Tarnas relax. If Gandalf called such company, they must be powerful indeed. But Tarns' own unease tightened. What sort of foe would drive Gandalf to bring 3 such masters? If this necromancer were not dealt with now, he feared worse trouble in the future. Tarns' worry ran so deep that, for a moment, even the ring in a certain hobbit's pocket looked no different from a plain gold band. Gandalf sighed. If I were younger, I might have gone alone, but I've learned that when something is dangerous, it's best to bring those you know. People watching each other makes many risks bearable. Tarns grumbled inwardly about such late realizations. In the lands between, any competent warrior knew the value of allies in a fight. Gandalf, however, had one last instruction before leaving. Before you enter Mirkwood, visit Rosgobel. Radagast lives in the forest between the Carrick and the Old Forest Road, near the southern edge of the Black Forest. And once you enter Mirkwood, stay on the paths, do not stray from the road. Tarns, I entrust Thorin and the others to you. Gandalf's tone was anxious. He worried most for Thorin and his company, though he was confident in Tarns. Gandalf mounted the horse he had bought and rode off. Let us be on our way as well, Thorin said. Gandalf suddenly urged him to wait. One more thing. Rosgobel is also home to a powerful shapeshifter named Bjorn. He's a friend of Radagast and can help you. He does not much like dwarves, so Tarns should be the one to approach him. Thorin said nothing at first, watching Gandalf. Then he remembered something. Speaking of horses, when do you plan to pay me for mine? That steed cost a fair few silver. Gandalf's smile vanished. Before he rode away, he tossed a heavy coin purse over his shoulder. Thorin caught it, weighed it, and put it away with a satisfied nod. Months later, after taking the longer route, Tarns and Thorin's company finally reached Rosgobel. Apart from the occasional band of human thieves, they had seen no orcs, an odd change from the constant harassment they'd faced before Rivendell. Bilbo, for his part, regretted only that he would not be in Hobbiton to celebrate the new year with a proper meal. Spring had come and the weather had warmed. Tarns wondered about his own lands, whether the golden tree grew on as he had left it, whether Stormvale Castle still contained it. But reaching Rosgobel meant they were about halfway through the journey, which was a comfort. Shall we visit Radagast, Thorin? Balin asked from his pony. No, Thorin replied bluntly. We've met Radagast before. He's eccentric. I want to reach the edge of Mirkwood today, rest overnight, and cross at first light tomorrow. Balin agreed. The sooner we cross, the less likely we are to meet those pointy-eared elves who might pry into our business. Thorin began to urge the party forward, but Fili, Kili, and Bofur stood frozen. What is it? Thorin demanded. Fili pointed ahead. Radagast is coming. Thorin frowned. Then we can just quicken our pace and leave him behind. Kili added. He's not alone. He has a bear as big as a small hill, and it runs far faster than our ponies. Dwalin gripped his axe. Is that bear coming to strike us down? Stay calm, Dwalin, Thorin snapped. Everyone, make ready and see what Radagast wants. He glanced at Tarns, hoping he would step forward. Gandalf had told Tarns about Radagast and Radagast's friend, after all. Tarns was already prepared. He'd listened as the dwarves debated and realized that none of them truly knew the lay of Mirkwood. Gandalf's warning to stay on the road made sense, but first they needed to find the right path into the forest. So when Radagast arrived, Tarns wanted to hear him out. Radagast came in on a rough sled drawn by enormous wild rabbits, and alongside him stalked a bear of such size that it startled even those from the lands between. The bear rose on its haunches, then slowly shrank, fur receding, until it stood as a very large, bare-chested middle-aged man, well over 2 meters tall. Tarns blinked in astonishment. If that was shapeshifting, he would have liked to learn it. He knew the bear feast prayers, but to truly become a giant bear, that skill was beyond him. "Hey! Gandalf's friend," Radagast called before he drew near. Tarns rode his mount forward and dismounted. The man who had been the bear paused a few cautious steps behind Radagast. Vestiges of his animal posture made him uneasy at the sight of so many dwarves. Radagast laughed softly and reassured him. "Don't be afraid, Born. He is Tarns, a friend of Gandalf." Tarns inclined his head. "Was your change just now some kind of sorcery?" he asked. Born looked at him, puzzled. He did not think Tarns rude, merely curious. "It's an inborn gift," Born said, "not sorcery." Tarns couldn't hide a small disappointment. He had hoped to learn such a transformation and thought how amusing it would be to turn into a bear and startle old comrades. Bjorn, noticing Tarns's expression, gave him an odd look, but his attention soon fixed on the dwarves. He had never seen so many dwarves alive and standing together. Tarns stepped slightly forward to shield them from Bjorn's scrutiny. "Radagast, do you know anything about Mirkwood?" he asked aloud. Radagast grinned. "Of course. Gandalf told me to watch for you if you passed by with a band of dwarves. Come with me. My hut lies a bit distant, but Bjorn's house is close. He and I have prepared plenty of local fare. Spend the day at Bjorn's, rest, eat, and we'll tell you what to expect of Mirkwood." Chapter 94. I have a poor sense of direction, but I don't think I do. Facing the brown-robed man's warm invitation, Thorin still wanted to refuse, but Tarns managed to persuade him. "Thorin, how much do you know about Mirkwood?" Tarns asked. Thorin thought for a moment. "Not much, and I haven't been there in years." "Then all the more reason to get information from Radagast," Tarns said. "You said the elves of Mirkwood betrayed you dwarves, didn't you?" Thorin nodded once. Tarns seized the opening. "So you don't want to wander blindly into Mirkwood and stumble into elven territory, do you?" This time, Thorin's nod was sharper. Tarns shrugged. "Then let's ask Radagast properly. Ideally, we'll get a detailed map so we can avoid the elves you dislike." So Tarns persuaded Thorin and his company to go to Bjorn's. Bjorn's attitude toward the dwarves wasn't especially friendly, but he kept basic courtesies. He provided abundant, tasty meat, fruit, and honeyed milk. Bilbo and the dwarves ate heartily. If Bjorn hadn't been sitting at the head of the table with a grim face, watching them, the dwarves might have broken into song. While they ate, Tarns found Radagast alone and asked him about Mirkwood. Radagast chuckled like an old prankster, gently set the little white mouse in his hand down on the floor, and stood up. Of course. Gandalf told me everything. He said you'd ask for a map, so I had my lovely diligent little wild rabbits run all over Mirkwood for me, and I drew what needed drawing." He fished a surprisingly clean sheet of paper from a pocket in his mud-stained, bird-dropping speckled brown robe. A detailed map lay on it, the ink clean and clear, with Radagast's little notes beside place names. As Tarns examined it, Radagast smiled and explained, "You can take the old forest road straight through Mirkwood. There's no need to make things complicated. You might meet forest elf patrols along the way. With their help, you'll get through faster." Tarns looked up from the map and glanced at the dwarves. Seeing them engrossed in Bjorn's food and paying no attention, he breathed easier. He didn't mind Radagast's shabby appearance. He quietly pulled him away from the table and lowered his voice. "You absolutely must not mention elves to the dwarves, especially the Mirkwood elves. There's bad blood between them. If Thorin and his group meet those patrols, I don't know whether the dwarves will treat the elves like orcs, or whether the elves will capture the dwarves first." "Oh." Radagast nodded, a little blank. Tarns took the map again. "Is there a safe route that avoids the elves? Show me." Radagast nodded, but his face grew troubled as he studied the map. Tarns noticed. "There isn't one?" he asked. Radagast led him to a quieter corner by the window and held the map up to the light. There are routes that avoid the elves, he said, but he tapped 3 paths with his mud-streaked finger. Tarns frowned at the little spider symbols marked along each one. You mean we might meet large spiders on these routes? Tarnas asked. Yes, Radagast said. When I last saw you in Gandalf, I warned you about those creatures. They used to be confined near Dol Guldur, but in recent months they've ranged farther. 2 months ago, they even began venturing into Forest Elf territory and attacking them. What happened? Any elf casualties? Tarnas asked. No, Radagast said. The invading spiders were all killed, but the attacks made the elves more vigilant. Elves who seldom leave their borders have begun wide-ranging patrols, hunts for those spiders. Paths where elves would never have gone before now show their presence. He rubbed his clothes and pointed to a few more tracks. I can't guarantee where elves will appear now. And since you said the dwarves and the forest elves are enemies, if the two meet, it could be worse than you imagine. Worse how? Tarnas asked. Radagast scratched his unwashed, matted hair. The forest elves of Mirkwood are not like the elves of Rivendell. They have shorter tempers. I've heard rumors of conflicts between the Lonely Mountain dwarves and the Elf King. If the dwarves consider the elves enemies, the elves will certainly think the same. I'm afraid you might be ambushed. Elven arrows are very accurate. Tarnas' face went serious. So the elves might be hostile to us. Thank you for the warning, Radagast. I'll be careful and won't let them harm my friends. Radagast hurried to soften the mood. No, don't misunderstand. Though dwarves and elves don't get along, you are not sworn enemies. The forest elves may be touchy, but they're not unreasonable. Tarns was quiet for a moment, then sighed. If only Gandalf were here, he'd know those elves. Look on the bright side, Radagast said. If Gandalf used magic to get me to prepare for you, he may have also used it to notify the Elf King, so the elves will make way when they see you. Tarnas could only hope so. A heavy tread sounded behind them. Tarns and Radagast turned to find Bjorn looming there, 2 heads taller than Tarns, looking down at them with an unreadable expression. Radagast blinked and asked with his eyes what was wrong. Bjorn spoke, looking only at Tarns. Your dwarf friends and that hobbit have eaten half my food stores and show no sign of stopping. My apologies. Tarns glanced at the table piled with empty plates and scraps and hurried to reply. The dwarves had used Bjorn's absence from the table to jump onto it, 1.5 times their height, and were now tapping a merry dance. Fili and Killy had started it. Thorin, instead of stopping them, leaned against a main pillar holding a wine glass, watching with a slight tipsiness and a smile. Tarns blinked. Thorin always avoided drink. Hadn't he had honeyed milk? Born added, and my stored mead was carried to the table by the dwarves when I wasn't looking. That explained Thorin's tipsiness and the dwarves' dancing. Bofer, play your flute. Bring your brothers Beefer and Bomber for a tune. Dwalin finished his drink. Somehow a glass of wine had become mead, and laughed uproariously. The longhouse rang with laughter. Even Bernal, Egon, and Millicent found themselves smiling. Only Bilbo sat prim and uneasy. The chaos reminded him too much of his own pantry at Bag End. Dwarves flinging roasted pork and cheese and delighting in catching the other's food. Though they caught what they threw and nothing went to waste, Bilbo couldn't bring himself to smile. He had felt the havoc those dwarves could wreak in his larder. When Bjorn turned and saw the scene, his face went ashen. I think Thorin will pay for this. By the way, do you have any empty rooms? Tarns poked his head out from behind Bjorn with a pained expression, then stepped forward. Yes, empty rooms. These dwarves are a bit tipsy. They can't travel today. Is there somewhere they can rest? Bjorn took a deep breath as if holding back something and said heavily, yes. Tarnas thanked him. After Thorin and the others passed out, Bjorn flung them, one person in each huge hand, into his clean stable, piled with fresh hay. Tarnis, Bilbo, and Bernal slept in the great eating room with big bedding provided for them. It seemed Bjorn's displeasure was reserved for the dwarves' manners, not Tarnis's small party. Bilbo's courtesy had won him Bjorn's tolerance. The next afternoon, the dwarves slowly stirred from their hangovers. With Bjorn's grim expression, Thorin paid for the food and drink and even the overnight stable fee, 13 silver coins, since the place they stayed was a stable, he said. You get what you pay for. Dwarves care about that. We won't let those who host us lose out, but don't think you can take advantage of us. That was Thorin's exact line. Bjorn didn't much care about the amount. He cared when they would leave. Radagast left with his rabbits that morning, and without the brown-robed wizard around, Born looked ready to lose patience with the dwarves. Thorin hurried his company away before the sun set. A few days later, they were in Mirkwood. Tarns's mouth twitched as a band of elves dropped out of who knows which canopy and aimed their bows at them, ready to loose. Before Radagast left, he'd told Tarns about the forest elves' routines, and Tarns had planned the safest crossing he could. Now he realized how wrong he'd been to let Thorin lead. Thorin apparently had an abysmal sense of direction. How else had they ended up in the forest elves' territory? Tarns had gone to the trouble of avoiding big spider territories and likely elven paths, had copied Radagast's map and even pointed the way, yet Thorin had volunteered to lead and managed to steer them straight into the elves' midst. The elves themselves were puzzled. They spoke in their tongue. How did these short folk get past our kin's defenses and into our lands? Do they know a path even we don't? Another wondered. Stop arguing. What's going on here? A young elf with pale golden hair tied up called sharply. A commanding figure stepped forward. Lord Legolas, we've found some intruders. Dwarves, 4 humans, and a hobbit, the leading elf captain said politely to the newcomer. Then he noticed Thorin and the others glaring, drew his bow with practiced ease, and in a cold voice Thorin and the others could understand warned, "Don't think I won't kill you, dwarf. I'd be quite pleased." Thorin said nothing. He only raised his head and gripped his axe. A figure moved to block him. Tarn stepped between Legolas and Thorin, the golden glow of a holy mark burning in his palm. Legolas's tone had been unfriendly, and Tarn's answered in kind. "Don't think that because you've surrounded us, you can do as you please. Elf, lay a hand on any of these dwarves and see what happens." Though Thorin had erred, he was still Tarns's companion, and Tarns would not allow him to be threatened. As Tarns stood firm, Bernal, Millicent, and Egon took up positions around them, preventing any sudden arrow from finding a dwarf's back. Thorin's tense shoulders eased, and he lifted his chin defiantly, meeting Legolas's stare. Chapter 95. Forest Elves. Legolas narrowed his eyes when he heard Tarn speak. His features grew even sharper. He ignored Thorin's insolent expression behind Tarn's. Dressed in the close-fitting garb of an elven archer, the elf prowled slowly, scrutinizing Tarns. "Are you a human mercenary hired by these dwarves?" he asked. "How much did they pay you to stand so brazenly beneath an elf's arrows?" Tarnish shifted his stance with Legolas's movement, angling himself so Thorin would not be exposed from other directions. "Those dwarves are my loyal friends, not merely hired hands," he replied. Legolas regarded that answer as the height of hilarity. He set down his bow, laughed aloud, and the other elves nearby smirked as well. "Dwarves? Loyalty?" he scoffed between laughs. "I never thought anyone would put those 2 words together. That's the finest joke I've heard in 100 years. Tarna's tone cooled. "What do you intend to do, then? If you mean to act, be decisive. Don't linger here." Legolas stopped laughing when he noticed a golden glow on Tarns's hand and grew cautious. "You're a wizard as well?" He examined Tarn's clothing more carefully, thinking, while the other elves remained poised with bows ready. Thorin and the dwarves glared back at the elves, and Bernal spoke quietly with Tarns and his companions. "There are 5 elves still hidden in the trees on my side. What about yours?" Egon narrowed his eyes and peered into the undergrowth. 7 on my side. I don't know where the dwarves have led us." Millicent added softly, "Only 1 elf hidden near me. His dress is not like the others, more like the elf who spoke to Tarns. We've never fought these particular elves. It's hard to judge their strength." Bernal mouthed, meaning he's probably a captain. If a fight breaks out and the elves target Thorin and the dwarves alone, there will be casualties. The 3 of them were frontline warriors, skilled at offense. Avoiding arrows was one thing, but protecting so many dwarves would be a different task, better suited to the defensive knights from Rodel City. Tarns listened to them all and felt impatience rising. He was moments from weaving a powerful spell to spirit Thorin and the dwarves away when Legolas suddenly broke his reverie and asked, "You, humans, Are you from the country called the Golden Tree? Tarns halted the spell, surprised. How do you know of the Golden Tree? Legolas smiled as if it were no surprise. His earlier hostility vanished. We learned of it from a Gondor merchant. The fruits that come from your lands are fragrant and delicious. Whether eaten fresh or brewed into wine, they are exceptional. We had hoped to send a trade caravan to your country for them, but the distance and the corruption that has lately troubled our forests have delayed us. He cleared his throat. If I am not mistaken, you are the golden wizard sung of in human songs. Lord Tarns of the Golden Tree, yes? Tarns nodded, unsure of Legolas's intent. Merchants from Gondor came this far? They do trade in Lake Town, Legolas explained. They bring your fruit there because it keeps so well on long journeys. That's how we learned of you. He spoke a few words in Elvish to the nearby archers and waved. The tension eased instantly. Most of the elves lowered their bows and retreated to their posts. Only a few remained behind Legolas. Legolas gave a brief look at the dwarves, then turned to Tarns with a courteous smile. My father has long wished to meet you. A man willing to rebuild civilization in the wasteland of Minheriath is rare, especially one who is a wizard. I would be honored if you would accompany me to my home to meet him, he added lightly. Let whatever unpleasantness arose between us vanish like mist in the moonlight. Thorin opened his mouth to refuse, but Balin stopped him. Do not make it difficult for Tarns, Thorin. Our priority is to get through Mirkwood. If we clash with these pointy-eared folk, it will only delay us. For elves, a month and a year are the same, but we must reach the Lonely Mountain before the next Durin's Day. Since they're willing to overlook this out of respect for Mr. Tarns, let us not provoke them. Once we have the mountain and the treasure, we will have time to settle scores. Balin gripped Thorin's arm and whispered the last words into his ear. Thorin fell silent, then nodded. Balin exhaled, relieved. He knew Legolas, the son of Thranduil, king of these forest elves. Balin had met Legolas before. If Thorin had truly affronted him, there would be grave consequences. Even with Tarns' power and his 3 companions, any open quarrel here could imperil their whole expedition. Since they were in Mirkwood and the Lonely Mountain was not far, it made no sense to risk more trouble. Tarns thought for a moment, then agreed. I have no objection, but how do you know I am Tarnis? Legolas answered with confidence. The bards sing of a great lord from the Golden Tree who wears armor like a white wolf. More importantly, the golden light you revealed just now shows your sorcery. I am certain, 10 out of 10, that you are Mr. Tarns. He clapped his hands, and a tall elf with auburn hair stepped out from the woods near where Millicent stood. Toriel, Legolas said softly, take your squad. Keep these dwarves from wandering off and return with me to my father. The female elf nodded and called her squad. 6 elves followed her and took position behind the dwarves. Keely stole a few looks at her and whispered to Feely, Is that one a fellow or a? Feely looked up, pretending to watch the trees while sneaking glances. I can't tell. They all look alike to me, neither quite one thing nor the other. He scowled. Why do you care about their gender anyway? Keely cleared his throat. Curiosity. Have you ever been to an elf palace? No, Feely answered. Toriel narrowed her eyes, sneered, and bent slightly to address the dwarf brothers who came only to her knees. Don't think I can't hear your mud-footed chatter. Behave. Lord Legolas, being polite to that human wizard, doesn't forgive your trespass into our lands. Feely and Keely rolled their eyes in unison, then pretended not to hear, and huddled together whispering. With the elves reassigned to patrol, Legolas turned back to Tarnas. We can go now, he said. Then he did a quick head count and frowned. I was told your company included 13 dwarves, 4 humans, and 1 hobbit. Where is the hobbit? Tarns spun around as well and discovered Bilbo was missing. Thorin, have you seen Bilbo? He asked. Thorin blinked. Bilbo? Our burglar is always with us. He stopped when he saw there was no hobbit in the company. Bofer, where's Bilbo? Bofer looked around, face drawn. I don't know. He was with us when the elves appeared. Legolas, eager to ingratiate himself and please the supposed wizard, offered briskly, If you need it, I can send elves to help you find your missing companion. None know Mirkwood better than we do. He was happy to be obliging, especially since the lost one was a hobbit, not a dwarf. Before Tarns could respond, a flustered voice shouted, I'm here. No need. I'm right here, Tarnas. Bilbo emerged from behind a tree, slightly out of breath. The elves near that tree stared in surprise. None had noticed anyone concealed there. Legolas, too, regarded the sudden hobbit with curiosity. Bilbo had indeed appeared unexpectedly. In the confusion when the elves surrounded them, Bofur had jostled him, and Bilbo fell. The ring he had picked up slipped from his pocket onto his finger, and he found himself invisible to others. Panic and wonder had seized him. Everything seemed altered. Voices whispered in his ear, and people's faces looked strange. He watched both elves and dwarves shimmer with a soft white light, while Tarns and his companions glowed with a brilliant golden aura. Bernal's and Millicent's lights differed slightly, but gold predominated. Before Bilbo could study more, he realized Tarn's party was looking for him and slipped the ring off to reveal himself. Legolas regarded Bilbo with a new sort of interest. "Your burglar companion's stealth is most impressive," he remarked, amused. He had not forgotten Thorin's casual use of the term burglar. Tarns agreed with a small smile. "Hobbits do have a knack for slipping away. It often surprises me." "Since he's been found," Legolas said, "come with me to the Palace of the Forest Kingdom. Perhaps you will be welcome at a banquet." As Legolas led them, the Palace of the Forest Elves revealed itself like a dream. Its architecture was unlike Rivendell's. This palace was woven from towering ancient trees and smoothed stone. Massive trunks served as columns, roots intertwined into foundations, branches and leaves forming living roofs, creating a green canopy. Stones were set between the trunks into staggered walls. A path paved with fluorite wound inward, bordered by carefully clipped shrubs and exotic flowers that gave off a faint, sweet scent. "Welcome to the Palace of the Forest Elves, Mr. Tarns," Legolas said, pride in his voice as he led the wizard toward the home where he had grown up. Chapter 96. Thranduil and Thorin Tarns made no effort to hide his admiration. His eyes shone. "What an astonishing place! Of all the buildings I've seen, this is the most magnificent." Legolas's lips curved into a small, proud smile at the praise for his homeland. Thorin scowled at the expression, brow knitting. Just as he was about to snap back, Balin tugged his sleeve and blinked hard, a silent warning to temper his temper. Thorin swallowed the sarcastic retort on his tongue, forced a stiff breath, and said hoarsely, "You won't begin to understand true grandeur until you stand before the lonely mountain." Though blunt, it was at least not a direct provocation to Legolas. Balin let out a quiet sigh of relief and took over with a warm smile. "Yes, the lonely mountain is a sight to behold." Legolas ignored Thorin's remark, turning his face coolly away as if Thorin weren't there at all. His gaze was detached, the very image of elvish indifference. Thorin's expression darkened. He clenched his fists until his knuckles paled, clearly angered by the slight. "Holo in Enin," Legolas murmured, as the last elf archer slipped between the pillars and disappeared deeper into the hall. Legolas's words were elvish. "Close the gate." Two guards in silver-gray armor bowed and obeyed. The heavy stone doors rumbled shut, cutting off the sounds of the forest and the group's earlier disputes. Silence and solemnity settled over the palace. Legolas led them along a path fashioned from rock and living wood. Carved patterns lined the road. Oil lamps hung at intervals and threw a warm, flickering light. As they walked, the path itself changed. Thick, winding tree branches had been smoothed into steps. Their surfaces were polished, yet still bore the grain and texture of living wood, as if they had grown there. Bilbo and the dwarves stared in wonder. Egon and Millicent's eyes widened as they took in the palace's marvels. Tarns and Bernal alone walked with unhurried steps and calm faces, as if nothing in the palace surprised them. They had seen the royal capital of Leyndell in the lands between, where great paths were formed from the golden tree's roots and branches, grand work that had left them steady and undisturbed. Legolas glanced back from time to time, watching their reactions. His gaze lingered on Tarnans and Bernal for a moment, a flicker of interest in their composure, then moved forward again. They walked deeper into the heart of the forest realm. "We have arrived." Legolas's voice was soft and clear like a breeze. The dwarves, who had been grumbling and growing impatient, fell into awed silence. They stood at the center of a vast chamber that felt like a temple to the forest. A colossal, ancient tree had been truncated to form a wide, polished platform. On that platform sat a throne carved from top-grade wood fashioned into entwined deer antlers, its lines graceful, the detailing so lifelike it seemed the antlers might move. Behind the throne, massive roots cascaded like a waterfall and merged with the stone in a natural mural. Towering pillars ringed the space, each etched with intricate elvish motifs, vines, stars, birds, forming an imposing, court-like structure. A slender figure sat upon the antlered throne, turned away from the visitors. Silver hair fell like moonlight over his shoulders, the tips faintly aglow. He wore a crown woven of wild berries and red leaves, the mark of autumn. His posture was composed. Even in silence, he seemed part of the surrounding wood. Tarn studied the throne a moment before his gaze moved to the 6 elven guards standing respectfully nearby. They wore the same silver-gray armor as the gatekeepers, faces grave, stances like pines. He drew no hostile impression from them. The elf on the throne lifted his head. Silver-gray eyes, cold as winter stars, swept over the group. His initial appraisal of the dwarves held an unmistakable mixture of disdain and indifference. The look was a blade. Thorin and his kin stiffened at once, faces hard and wary. But when the king's eyes fell on Tarn's, they softened. A faint, refined smile touched his lips. "Welcome, honored guest," the elf said, voice like clear running water, regal with natural authority. "May the blessing of the wood be upon you. I am Thranduil, king of the woodland realm." Tarns inclined his head slightly. "Greetings, King Thranduil. I am Tarns, a lord of the Golden Tree. I am honored you and your people have taken a liking to the fruits of my land. It gladdens me that Mirkwood enjoys them." Thranduil's smile tightened into approval. Fruits, touched by even a trace of magic, are rare. That they come from the hard lands of Minhiriath is all the more remarkable. His gaze shifted back to the dwarves, and his tone grew colder. However, he paused, voice authoritative yet faintly apologetic. "If it were only you and I, we could converse at length about cooperation. But now," he looked them over like a judge, "we must first address the matter of these dwarves." His words severed the gentleness in the hall. Thorned and hostile expressions replaced the earlier politeness among the dwarves. Thorin's jaw tightened. He was about to retort when Tarns stepped forward and spoke calmly. "King Thranduil," Tarnas said evenly, "we did not intend to trespass. We meant only to pass through Mirkwood, but we lost our way." "Is that so, Legolas?" Thranduil asked, tilting his head. His gaze found Legolas, then slid to Toriel behind the dwarves. Legolas immediately looked away and said coolly, "Toriel, you answer." There was a subtle tension between father and son that Tarns noticed. The exchange was curt and strained, as if they were not on the most familiar of terms. Toriel stepped forward with light, precise steps. Her brown leather armor caught the lamplight. Keely, among the dwarves, shouted impulsively, "Hey, you tall one, you can prove we stumbled in by accident, right?" Toriel glanced at him, eyes hard and unamused. She did not heed Keely. Instead, she approached the throne, knelt on one knee, and spoke with measured respect. "Lord Thranduil, though these dwarves may have appeared surprised when our sentries found them, that does not prove they meant no harm. They somehow slipped past other of our watch and entered unobserved." Thranduil inclined his head. "I understand. Toriel, you and your company may continue your patrol." "Yes," Toriel rose and led her squad out. Tarns watched her go, puzzled that Thranduil would call her off so abruptly, especially just returned from duty. The hint of displeasure between them nagged at him. Thranduil turned back to Tarns. "You heard her. My men cannot be sure these dwarves did not enter with ill intent, can you?" Tarnas frowned. "With respect, King Thranduil, that is conjecture. If we meant harm, we would not have come through so silently." Thranduil gave a soft, almost amused laugh. "Of course I know that. Tales of your deeds have reached even the men of Lake Town. How could I mistake you for any common meddler? Compared to Gandalf the Grey, Radagast the Brown, and Saruman the White, you are far more direct in dealing with enemies. Sometimes I wonder if you are truly a wizard or some orc-bane in disguise." His amusement faded, his voice hardening. "Do not misunderstand, Lord of the Golden Tree. I am not accusing you, your 3 companions, or that hobbit of wrongdoing. My concern is these dwarves." Thranduil's eyes chilled as he fixed them on Thorin. "I know their faces. When I once demanded jewels rightfully belonging to my people from King Thror of the Lonely Mountain, one of your folk sat beside that greedy king's throne. Thorin Oakenshield, heir of Durin." Thorin strode forward to stand before Tarns, fury simmering in his voice. Those jewels were reforged by my people. How can they be yours? Balin closed his eyes as if to ward off what he knew would come. His hands trembled slightly. Dread and helplessness crossed his features. He seemed to sense the looming conflict. Thranduil's response was a harsh, mirthless laugh. I do not intend to trade words for the sake of it. Your incursion and insolence before my throne are themselves grievous. Were it not for the goodwill of the Lord of the Golden Tree, I would have had you imprisoned on the spot until you learned courtesy and respect. Thorin's reply was cutting and unbowed. Do you think such words will shame me? Or do you think your speeches can cover the fact that you elves abandoned us to our fate once? Tarnis watched the two, torn. Then Thranduil's face shifted. The fury left, and something more playful and knowing took its place. He rose from the throne and walked down the steps, halting the guards who were poised with drawn blades. He addressed Tarns then, though his words were aimed at Thorin. Your purpose in coming to the Lonely Mountain, bringing so large an escort, and even enlisting a powerful wizard and his friends, is plain. He turned to the dwarf, who glared at him. You have found a way into the mountain because you seek treasure, the king's jewel, the Arkenstone. Thorin's face betrayed him. He looked away briefly before meeting Thranduil's gaze again. The king's smile sharpened as if he had seen the twitch that gave the truth. It is priceless to you, Thranduil continued. I understand. Thorin's answer was a growl. What business is it of yours? Will you let us return to the Lonely Mountain? Thranduil returned to his throne with graceful disdain and spoke slowly. I had intended to. There is a gem in that mountain I desire, the white gem that holds pure starlight. It was kept selfishly by your folk. It belongs to my people. Tarns caught his emphasis. Intended? Yes, originally, Thranduil said. He leaned forward, voice dropping. If that dragon in the Lonely Mountain had not awakened and flown forth again, preying upon Lake Town and taking maidens from the houses by the lake, I would have turned a blind eye to your dwarves' coming. I might even have supplied you with weapons and provisions to return to the mountain. The hall held its breath at that revelation. Chapter 97. The Dragon Awakens. Early. The mocking expression on Thorin's face vanished the moment he heard of the dragon. His pupils constricted violently. He took 2 stumbling steps backward and barely steadied himself against a stone pillar, fingers clawing at the carved patterns until his knuckles went white. Impossible, he gasped. Smaug has lain dormant inside the Lonely Mountain for 60 years. How could he wake now, of all times? Thranduil watched the dwarf prince's discomposure with cool amusement, his fingertips tapping the armrest of his antlered throne. He seemed to relish the cold sweat beading on Thorin's brow. Why not? He said lightly. You chose this moment to march for the Lonely Mountain. Why could the dragon not choose this moment to open his golden eyes? He let the final words hang. He slept by his own will. No sword could force his eyelids closed. Tarns lifted a hand and pressed it to Thorin's trembling shoulder, his face grave. King Thranduil, please tell us everything you know about the state of the Lonely Mountain. Thranduil leaned back, idly stroking the arm of his throne. Only scattered words, brought by refugees from Long Lake. But one thing is certain, while you were drilling through tree hollows in Mirkwood, some uninvited guest, awoke the dragon in a way you could not imagine. He fixed Thorin with a level look. And I suspect this awakening is connected to your expedition. In places you cannot see, someone or something entered the Lonely Mountain and roused the beast. Thorin shook his head, disbelief hardening his features. No, the main gate of the Lonely Mountain has been sealed by our hands. Collapsed stone and fallen rock block every entrance. No one could have gone in unless the dragon himself wanted out. Perhaps someone discovered your little secret, Thranduil countered. He left the throne and drifted toward Thorin, silver hair falling like a waterfall as he leaned close and murmured into the dwarf's ear. That secret passage you think even the birds do not know about? Thorin snapped back, outraged. That is even more impossible. Only my kin know of that passage. Thranduil laughed outright at the roar. So you do have a secret passage into the Lonely Mountain, and you meant to reclaim your king's treasure from the dragon. Thorin's roar died away. He grew dark and low as he snarled. Are you mocking me? Thranduil let his smile fade and stepped back, eyes sharp. Mocking? You said it yourself. I am merely drawing the obvious conclusion from your words, or is your head as stubborn as the mountain's stone? Tarns quickly moved between them, folding his arms across his chest as if to mediate. He sighed softly. Gentlemen, allowing this chain of hatred to choke you will do no one any good. After steadying Thorin for a moment, he turned to Thranduil. I joined Thorin's company because he helped me in my darkest hour. I swore by the golden tree to help him face that dragon. Tell me everything you know of Smaug's awakening. Thranduil resumed his seat on the antlered throne. Ask the Long Lake folk who fled to my realm, but I cannot guarantee they will say more than the rest. 3 nights ago, under the eclipse, 17 Long Lake people scurried into the woods like scalded moles. Their lungs were burned, and they say dark wings swept over the Long Lake, just as when River Valley Town burned 100 years ago. Tarn stepped slightly forward, placing his right hand over his heart in an elven salute he had learned watching the warriors greet Legolas when they entered the palace. Where are these people now? Their accounts might help my friend and me discern the dragon's habits and weaknesses, Thranduil said. They are under my care, being tended by my healers. Legolas, you will take our guests to them later. Legolas nodded once, silent. Thranduil then warned Tarnis. Tarnis, dragonfire scars more than the flesh. Their souls bear burn marks. Are you sure you wish to listen to the ravings of the damned? I appreciate the warning, King Thranduil, Tarnis replied. But truth often hides in broken shards. I am skilled at piecing together fragments, like peeling a cocoon to find the moth. He glanced at Thorin and the dwarves clustered behind him, then turned and made the formal elven salute toward the throne. I also ask that your majesty grant us a secluded place to stay in the woodland realm. We will be no trouble. Thranduil's silver-gray eyes swept the dwarves, a mocking smile at his lips. So long as your kin are not as noisy as heat-maddened sparrows, my halls have rooms enough to tuck you away. Thorin sneered. Only stone lizards hiding in moss fear a little noise. Any miner's pick can level their mud nests. Before Thranduil could reply, Tarns bowed briefly to the Elven King and then seized Thorin's wrist. Come on, Balin, take the others with you. He practically hauled Thorin down the throne steps. Light caught on the silver flashes of the White Wolf war ghost armor as they moved, an odd, chaotic glint in the hall. Thranduil's eyes flicked to Legolas to follow them, then found Thorin's posture entertaining. His laughter trailed them. Run slower, dwarves. Don't let your beards trip you. Shut your ancient tree mouth. Tarns, let go. I'll carve a few scratches on your pretty face. Thorin bellowed. He strained to break free, but Tarns held firm until the dwarves were settled. Tarns leaned against the cold marble wall afterward and rubbed his throbbing temple. Through the heavy oaken door, the dwarves' bickering rose and fell like a dozen dull axes striking his nerves. Even the air seemed filled with the clangor of anvils and furnaces. Millicent, watching him, touched his vambrace. Her voice was like cool water over parched soil. Are you well? Your heart races like an elk spooked in the glen. Tarns managed a strained smile. I'm fine. Just a headache. I miss Gandalf. I think I finally understand why he always wore that pointed hat. Perhaps it muffled the dwarves' roars. He scanned the room and frowned as he noticed 2 familiar faces were absent. Where are Bernal and Egon? He asked. Millicent smoothed a strand of crimson hair that the night wind had mussed and said, While you were placating Thorin, Legolas led them to the Long Lake refugees camp. She hesitated. Egon wanted to see those burned by dragonfire to see if he could help. They went that way. The elf said to follow the road. Tarns followed Millicent's pointing finger to a forest path and rose, leaving the marble wall. As a dragon warrior, Egon knows dragonfire wounds well. He might glean clues about Smaug from the burns. Let us go. They followed the path Legolas had indicated. At the end of the ancient vine-wreathed road, faint campfires blinked among the trees. Pushing aside drooping silver fern fronds, Tarns found Egon kneeling beside a victim, examining a charred arm, with Bernal standing nearby. Over 20 refugees from Long Lake crowded into simple houses the elves had set aside, sulfur-blackened wounds exposed. 3 elven archers hid among gnarled roots, keeping a silent watch. Thranduil's mercy had extended to these people. At least, he did not brand them as he had the dwarves. Under Legolas's calm presence, Egon had quickly won the migrants' trust. "Who will volunteer?" he asked. "I may be able to treat your burns." He took a dark green jade bottle from his pack and opened it. A strong herbal scent rose, and he revealed a cool green paste. Legolas raised an eyebrow. "Archer, we have already applied the elves' remedies for burns to these people." Egon did not look up. He beckoned a young man forward. The boy's head and much of his face were swathed in white bandages, and he stepped up willingly. Egon shrugged. "I smell it, of course. This ointment has a strong scent, but I've treated dragon wounds before, similar to these. I want to try my ointment. It may work better." The boy's father hurried over, anxious. He had been tending other grievously injured townsmen and had not noticed his son approaching. With his father's worried gaze on him, the boy unwound the bandage from his face to show the terrible pitted burns beneath. He was nearly disfigured. Without the elves' herbs and glintstone magic, he would have likely died of infection. Still, the flesh showed early necrosis. Egon chuckled softly. "Don't worry. This is a rare tonic I keep. It will help mend his face." Tarn stepped forward and addressed the father as well. "Egon is the best I know at treating dragonfire wounds. I am Tarnas, and I know a little of the old magics. If Egon's ointment cannot do it, I can at least keep your son alive and whole." The father's brow stayed furrowed, but when his son stared at him with hollow hope, he could not refuse. He embraced the boy and whispered, "Bane, I am with you." Egon dabbed the green ointment from the jade bottle and smoothed it over the burned patches. The father held his son tightly, eyes fixed on the treated flesh. Bane did not cry out. When the father saw his son's slight nods in the absence of pain, he exhaled with relief. Egon kept working, smiling in a grim way. "Don't rebandage it. In half a day, he can wash his face. He will look like himself again." Legolas narrowed his eyes at the bottle. To promise healing from dragonfire in half a day, there were wonders in the Golden Tree's land that even he had not seen in all his long life. The boy's father looked up, hope mixing with gratitude. Could you help the others? Many are unconscious. Even with the elves' aid, some barely clung to life." Tarns waved a hand to calm him. "We will help. Egon, tend to them. Bernal, aid with the restorative Golden Tree prayers." Thank you," the father said again and again. Tarns held up a palm. "No thanks yet. I have questions for you. Your answers will be payment for our treatment." The man's face relaxed, as if this were expected. "If it were not for you and your friends, I do not know what we would have done. Answering you is the least I can do. Forgive me, I have not introduced myself. I am Bard of the Long Lake Guard. P.S. Happy Chinese New Year, dear readers. May the new year bring you abundant fortune." Chapter 98. Bard Tarns' eyes lit up. He hadn't expected this man to be a member of the Lake Town Guard, someone who would certainly know more about the dragon than anyone else. "Bard," he asked, "can you tell me more about the dragon that attacked your lake town?" Bard nodded, glancing toward the Lake Town refugees, then answered with a somber expression. "It was 3 nights ago, as everyone was preparing for bed. I had finished my day's work and was heading home to prepare for the next day when the ground began to tremble and dust fell from the rafters. At first, I thought it was an earthquake, so I woke my 3 children and led them outside to an open space." His voice trembled, not from fear, but from anger. "We all gathered in the open like that. But we were wrong. It wasn't an earthquake at all. The huge boulders blocking the Lonely Mountain's main entrance were knocked down by Smaug, the dragon that hasn't been seen in decades. When it landed, the tremors came, and it looked down on Lake Town from the dark sky and spewed fire. My son Bane was burned." "This dragon didn't seem intent on leveling Lake Town," Bard continued bitterly. "After scorching a few streets with its fire, it demanded that the master of Lake Town come to see it. The cowardly master was so terrified, he obeyed everything Smaug wanted. He even let the dragon take a number of innocent young women back to the Lonely Mountain, and he disbanded our guard. He started casting a golden statue of Smaug in the center of town. Tarnis and Millicent could see Bard's hatred for the master nearly matched his hatred for Smaug. Perhaps, in Bard's mind, the master and the dragon were not so different. Tarnis tried to soothe him. "Relax, Bard. What happened next? Did you lead the people of Lake Town to the woodland realm to escape Smaug?" "Yes, but not everyone," Bard said, nodding then shaking his head. Tarns looked puzzled. Bard sighed. After Smaug carried those women away, it didn't return, but the master became stranger than ever. He was always an exploiter, but after that meeting, he squeezed us even harder. All the money he extorted was piled up in the center of town to cast that statue. I told him we couldn't fight the awakened dragon, but we could leave while it was gone. He wouldn't listen. He expelled me and others who wanted to leave and kept my 2 daughters behind. That wretch told me they would be the dragon's next meal. Bard clenched his fists, hatred burning in his eyes. That's why I came to the woodland realm, not only to heal those who were willing to follow me, but to ask for help to rescue my daughters. Tarnis shifted his gaze to Legolas, silently asking if this was true. Legolas caught his look and nodded slightly. He did ask us for help. King Thranduil refused. 1, because Smaug's awakening is a grave matter and rash action would be dangerous. 2, our forces are stretched thin. Are you short-handed because of those large spiders? Bernal interjected. Legolas looked surprised at the question, and Bernal shrugged. Radagast the Brown told us the giant spiders have lately been bold enough to invade your borders. If that strange wizard said so, then it is true, Legolas replied. The remaining descendants of Ungoliant are expanding their activities, and many of my people are delayed by that threat. Bard let out a heavy sigh. We encountered those man-eating spiders on the way here. If not for Prince Legolas helping us, we wouldn't have reached the woodland realm safely. So I understand King Thranduil's refusal. Tarns asked, Do you know why the dragon suddenly woke from its sleep? Bard reflected bitterly for a moment, then shook his head. I'm sorry, Mr. Tarns. I don't know. It flew out of the lonely mountain without warning, came to Lake Town, burned and killed, and left. Tarns, briefly imagining the absurdity of a dragon waking from hunger after such a long rest, dismissed the thought. He pressed on. Did anything unusual happen in Lake Town recently? Bard's answer caught Tarns's interest. Nothing inside Lake Town, Bard said. But outside, something rare occurred. What was it? Tarns asked. A group of orcs were moving along the lake's edge at night, Bard said bluntly. I was rowing home and saw them. I shot and killed them with arrows. At first they tried to swim for the center of the lake and get to a boat, but then they fled so fast they didn't even take their comrades' bodies. He pulled a scrap of tanned hide from his pocket. After they fled, I meant only to take the weapons from the bodies, but I noticed the tattered hides all bore the same symbol. Out of curiosity, I kept a piece. I planned to look up what it meant in Lake Town, but then you know what happened. Tarns frowned as he studied the symbol. It looked familiar. He glanced at Bernal and Millicent. Egon was still treating refugees and hadn't seen the hide. Bernal and Millicent also thought the mark looked known but couldn't place it. Tarns turned to Legolas. Have you seen this symbol before? Legolas shook his head, half proud, half amused. I've slain too many orcs to memorize all their sigils. They have every sort of mark. From behind Bard, Bilbo's sudden voice piped up. I think I might remember. Tarnis barely flinched at Bilbo's appearance anymore. Bilbo, why are you here? He asked. The hobbit shuffled over, barefoot and awkward. He glanced at Legolas, then at Tarnis. Thorin and the others are arguing about what to do next. It's loud and makes my head buzz, so I went out for air. I saw you and Miss Millicent walking, so I followed, not daring to disturb you. I actually arrived earlier, but none of you seemed to notice. Bard peered at Bilbo with curiosity. I read about hobbits in books, that they're good at cooking, throwing, and stealth. I never expected to see a living hobbit. Bilbo snapped his fingers and straightened up. Which book said that? Not true. We're very good at cooking. The throwing and stealth stuff is nonsense. Tarns chuckled. Bilbo, look at the hide he brought from the orcs. Do you recognize the mark? Bilbo stood on tiptoe and took the fragment from Bard. You don't need to say from the corpse, you know. He squinted. Isn't this the same as on the wanted posters for the 3 bad lads you, Mr. Bernal, and Miss Millicent caught last winter at the Prancing Pony? I'd swear it's identical. Tarns's pupils narrowed. Azog? Azog. The name made Legolas's expression harden. Azog the Defiler, the pale orc. Why mention him? Tarns explained Azog's bounty against Thorin. Legolas's tension eased slightly. Azog has a blood feud with Thorin and his kin. It makes sense he'd send men with a price on them. But why would Azog's forces be at Lake Town? Azog is a capable commander, but to wake Smaug would take more than some orcs. Whoever sent them must be powerful enough that Smaug would take notice. Whoever can command Azog and make Smaug listen. Legolas trailed off, his unease deepening. He turned to Bard. May I have the hide? I need to examine it. Of course, Bard said. I shot a few that night and kept several hides with the same symbol. He produced another scrap and handed it to Legolas. The elf thanked him and hurried away. Bilbo watched Legolas go and asked Tarns anxiously, Did something happen? Tarns crouched to reassure him. Your good memory may have just helped that elf prevent something worse. Tarns then looked back at Bard. Why didn't you tell the elves about the orcs when you first met them? Bard's face was rueful. Orcs often raid outside Lake Town at night. I didn't think those I shot were anything special. I planned to investigate the symbol later, but Smaug's attack took everything from us. Tarns thought of Bard's daughters left behind in Lake Town. An idea had taken shape. He chose his words carefully. The elves said they couldn't spare anyone to rescue your daughters, but I happen to know a band of very capable helpers who are available. Would you be willing to hire them? Bard's face brightened. Yes, absolutely. I will recommend to you the great dwarf leader, the Lord of the Blue Mountains, heir of Durin's line, Thorin Oakenshield, and his dwarf kin. Chapter 99, A Sure Way to Kill Smaug. Bard's fingers rubbed absently at the edge of his sleeve as he repeated under his breath. Thorin Oakenshield? The name had sounded faintly familiar before, but when Tarns added that the other party was the heir of Durin's line, Bard's memory clicked into place. Tarns noticed the change in his expression. You've heard of him? Bard hesitated, then nodded. I haven't seen him in person, but my ancestors met Thorin a few times. I learned about him from books that were passed down in my family. Tarnas leaned forward, curious. Legolas said King Thranduil might meet you in person. Now you say your ancestors met Thorin. Your true identity is more than just a Lake Town guard, isn't it? Bard let out a bitter smile. You see more than you let on, Mr. Tarns. I'm actually a direct descendant of Lord Girion of the River, a proud line, but that's only history now. The old river town turned to ash long ago, the last of Girion's blood left as a guard with his son. Under the wooden houses of Lake Town, some of the stone blocks from Rivertown still lie buried. Tarns rested a hand on Bard's shoulder for a moment. The linen was coarse, but warmth came through. Come with me. Let the descendant of Durin decide this for himself. Bernal, who had been tending to the wounded, glanced up with understanding, while Egon wiped the silver scraper clean of ointment and nodded to Bard. Go, don't worry. Their injuries aren't serious. Millicent fell back at the end of the little procession, moonlight turning the dark patterns on her cloak into flowing streams. Bilbo tiptoed around a scatter of bandages and leaned close to Bard. Don't worry, he whispered. Thorin and the others are loud, but they're good dwarves. Bard had wanted to say that he didn't find Durin's kin especially gentle, but Bilbo's blind faith in Thorin's smile made him fall silent. As they walked, Tarns asked, When Smaug attacked Lake Town, did you counterattack? I want to know if the dragon has any obvious weaknesses. Bard fell into memory. When Smaug first came, I led a few men who trusted me, and we tried to fight back. But his black scales were impossibly hard. Ordinary weapons couldn't hurt him. We even shot him with wind crossbows, and the bolts just bounced off. I tried everything I knew, but I never found a weak spot. Tarns's face showed surprise. He hadn't expected this human to meet a falling dragon with courage and resourcefulness. The descendant of Girion lived up to his heritage. Tarns breathed inwardly. Ordinary weapons can't harm Smaug? Perhaps weapons from other lands, or sorcery might. No, he reminded himself, it was too early to conclude. Dragons were not to be underestimated. If a close-quarters confrontation was unavoidable, it would be better to start with glintstone magic. He wasn't sure whether Smaug's scales were tougher than the stone dragon scales he had heard of, but the thought settled in his mind. Keep ranged magic ready. They reached the little house where Thorin and the others were staying. Thorin and Balin were standing outside. Thorin's face was clouded, and Balin looked helpless. It seemed they'd just argued. Tarns and the others were noticed, and the two dwarves looked over. Tarns took the lead. Thorin, why are you out? Thorin motioned for Tarns to come aside and spoke quietly. We argued about whether to press on to the lonely mountain. Tarns glanced at Balin and also lowered his voice. What happened? Thorin nudged Balin. The kindly-faced dwarf spoke in a small voice that still carried conviction. I suggested we should not continue. With the dragon awakened, it's not fitting for us to go on. Tarnis listened. Balin continued. Before Smaug woke, our plan was simple. Find the secret door, send the hobbit in to steal the Arkenstone, and that would prove Thorin's right to the throne. But now the chances of getting the Arkenstone are near zero. Thorin's voice grew low and fierce. It can still be done. We've seen Bilbo's skill over the last few days. Maybe he can take it right from under the dragon's nose. Balin's smile was strained. And if he can't, Bilbo will die, and then Smaug will know that a dwarf of Durin's line was involved. It will fly out, it will find us, and we will all burn. Thorin, you must not die. Your life matters to our people in the Blue Mountains. Thorin's answer was immediate. When I hired Master Bilbo, the contract made it plain that he took the risk of dragonfire. If the task could be done without danger, why would I hire a hobbit who can't fight? Reclaiming the Lonely Mountain has been my life's wish. That matters more than my own life. Balin looked to Tarns. That's why we argued. Tarnis, would you really face an awakened dragon head-on? Balin hoped to sway Tarns. He knew Tarns' power and feared an awake Smaug left little chance. Tarns considered and said, rationally, Balin is right. Once Smaug is awake, the expedition to the Lonely Mountain is nearly over. Balin showed surprise. He hadn't expected Tarns to side with him. Thorin stared at Tarns, incredulous. How can this be? Tarns, why are you like Balin? Didn't you promise to kill that dragon? Tarns pressed his hand to Thorin's shoulder. Don't be hasty. I wouldn't have said Balin was right if I hadn't just met Bard. If I hadn't met him, Bernal, Millicent, Egon and I would likely have left with Thorin back to deal with the dragon. But Bard just told me something important, something that concerns you, especially you, Thorin. Is Bard the man you brought? Thorin asked. Tarnis nodded and called Bard over. Bard, show what you showed me before to these two dwarves. This is Thorin, and this white-bearded dwarf is Balin. Bard stepped forward and produced a scrap of animal hide stamped with a peculiar mark. Thorin took it from him, eyes narrowing. As Bard watched Thorin closely, he saw the dwarf matched the portraits in the books, though Thorin seemed less concerned with his appearance than the hide. This is Azog's mark, Thorin said, voice tightening. Even like this, I can tell. He snapped his head up to fix Bard with a fierce gaze. Where did you get this? Bard shrugged, unfazed. Calmly, he drew more scraps from his cloak, all marked the same, and offered them with a half-smile. If you're interested, I can sell them. Thorin froze. Balin was equally baffled and looked to Tarns. Mr. Tarns, explain. Let's go inside and talk, Tarns said. Feely and Killy have likely been listening at the door long enough. At his words, a commotion came from behind the door. Feet stamped, voices whined. You stepped on my foot! Shut up! You pulled a beard hair! Thorin pushed the door open, and the room burst into noisy pretense. The dwarves inside suddenly pretended they had been merrily chatting, laughing too loudly. Thorin's jaw ticked. Only moments ago they had been raging at each other about Smaug. Now they were an altogether different tableau. Tarns entered and told them what he had learned and his suspicions. As he spoke, silence fell over the dwarves. Bilbo blinked, noticing even Beaufort looked serious. He missed Gandalf's steady voice now. The mood was too heavy for jokes. Dwalin was the first to break the hush. Mr. Tarns, are you saying Azog had something to do with Smaug waking? How could a proud dragon be made to answer an orc? You are right, Tarnis replied. Dragons wouldn't serve Azog willingly, but Gandalf has long feared the return of a certain enemy. He supported Thorin's quest because the Lonely Mountain is strategically precious. I suspect the one who roused Smaug is that enemy Gandalf warned about, and Azog is only carrying out orders, sending his servants toward the mountain. Gloin stroked his fiery beard. Whether true or not, we must prepare for a dragon attack. Keely's hand shot up. Gloin, if Tarn says dragons wouldn't heed Azog, why prepare? Feely clamped his brother's hand down. Just because the dragon wouldn't obey Azog doesn't mean Azog can't make it attack us. For example, by telling his master, kill all of Durin's kin. The mountain is tied to us, and the dragon has a deep grudge against our line. It's very likely it would do it. Balin worried aloud. Shouldn't we leave the woodland realm and return to the Blue Mountains, gather forces to face Smaug? Thorin shook his head. No, have you forgotten how the representatives of the 7 dwarf kingdoms turned me away? The shame of it is fresh. If word spread that Smaug might fly to the Blue Mountains, they'd vanish into their halls. They wouldn't help. Balin fell silent. Tarns finally spoke up. I also don't think now is the time to retreat, but for a different reason than Thorin. I plan to use Thorin as bait to draw the dragon back to the palace you dwarves made and kill it there while it still clings to its hoard in the mountain. Killy looked puzzled. Why there? Filey echoed the question, equally puzzled. Tarnas answered, all of you who saw Smaug agree on one thing. He can fly, and fly very high. Out in the open sky, even I couldn't be sure of killing a dragon. But inside the Lonely Mountains halls, where the ceiling limits its movement, that's where I might have a chance, Tarns finished, and perhaps many ways to end it. The room was still as the dwarves considered it. Tarns's plan gave them something concrete to cling to. Not a march back into safety, but a way to turn the mountain into their advantage. Chapter 100, Bard's Reward. When Tarns spoke, Bard's eyes went wide. But a dragon's scales are harder than black iron, he protested. This is suicide, Mr. Tarns. I know you are a wizard, but you just saved my son. There's no way I can stand by and watch you walk to your death. Balin shook his head, the old dwarf's silver beard heaving with each breath. He rested a gnarled hand on Thorin's shoulder. I disagree as well, Mr. Tarns. Letting Thorin act as bait? That's practically sending him straight into Dragon's mouth. We can be the bait, the brothers Killy and Feely shot back together, grinning at one another. As kin of Durin's line, they believed their presence might draw Smaug's attention. Balin spun to glare at them, disappointment creasing his brow, veins standing out on his forehead. He was nearly at the point of scolding them outright. The hall erupted. Dwarves shouted and bumped the table. Gloin slammed his fist into wood. Nori shoved a chair back with a clatter, and the sound swelled until it seemed to lift the roof. Dwalin's rough voice cut through the din. Let Thorin be bait? Not unless you step over me first. If anyone's going to be bait, it'll be me. Ori crouched in a corner, voice small. But can we really succeed? He's Smaug, the most terrible thing alive. Tarnis put his hands out until the din lessened, then turned to Thorin with steady seriousness. This is dangerous, of course. We are not slaughtering a pig. We are trying to fell a dragon. But the main question is whether Thorin himself will agree to be bait. If he refuses, I have other plans, but it's very likely Smaug will then escape the Lonely Mountain. Thorin met Tarna's gaze. If I become the bait, he asked, how confident are you of killing Smaug? Tarnas answered without hesitation. 99%. I don't claim 100 only because I cannot foresee every unforeseen thing, but I can ensure your safety, so long as you trust me completely. Thorin looked at his kin, raised his hand, and closed it in a hard fist. Then what is there to hesitate about? Of course I agree. With Tarns, we will kill the dragon. Kill the dragon! The hall thundered, and the dwarves raised their voices in a roar. Reclaim the Lonely Mountain! The cheering filled the room. Balin sighed and, resigned, nodded his consent. Thorin allowed himself a satisfied smile, then glanced at Bard, who lingered at the edge of the crowd. Why are you still here, human? He asked. I thank you for the information you gave Tarns. You may go now. Bard suppressed a sour retort and answered politely. Mr. Tarns asked me to stay. I came on a commission. He said you might help me. Tarns nodded. This is Bard, one of the Lake Town guards. He organized the people when Smaug struck. He has another identity you might know. Thorin appraised the refugee-clad man with a cold look. What identity could be worth our attention? The master of Lake Town? He is descended from Girion, the former lord of River Valley Town, Tarns said. Balin's eyes brightened with recognition. Ah, Girion's blood, he said softly. No wonder I saw something familiar in him. You resemble your forefather, Bard. When the dragon came, Girion stood his ground and held River Valley Town to the end, buying time for others to flee. Bard shook his head and cut off the old tales. Let the old stories lie. I've come because my 2 daughters are trapped in Lake Town. They could be offered to the dragon at any moment. Will you help me rescue them? I will pay a fitting reward. He rubbed the strap of his quiver as he spoke. The nervous creak of leather underscored his urgency. The dwarves exchanged looks. Only Gloin, a father himself, rapped the table and said bluntly, "Tell us the whole story. We don't swing hammers for unclear business." He pushed a water skin over. "Drink and explain slowly." Bard took it and spoke through the whole tale. When he finished, Thorin frowned and turned to Tarns. "This seems separate from our plan to kill the dragon. Why did you recommend we take up his cause?" Tarns cleared his throat. "Two reasons. First, it gives you a plausible reason to leave the woodland realm. With Thranduil and you, Thorin, relations aren't what you'd call amicable. If you accept this commission, at least Thranduil cannot openly bar you from leaving his borders without losing face." Thorin sneered. "That old tree king will make trouble in other ways, even if he lets us go." Beaufort waved his flute and grinned. "If he dares obstruct us, I'll turn the tale into a song that will shame pointy ears across Middle-earth." The dwarves laughed and nodded. Tarns went on. "Second, Bard says the master of Laketown has become, for reasons unknown, a lackey of Smaug. There may also be orcs in Laketown, those that were charged with rousing the dragon. If we go there, we might capture and question them and learn what Azog and his followers are planning." At the name Azog, Thorin's face burned. "Yes, we must learn what that orc scum plans. I cannot stand idle while my kin were slaughtered. I will have its blood." He turned to Bard and inclined his head. "In the name of Thorin Oakenshield, I swear I will rescue your daughters from the master." Then Thorin's expression hardened. "But looking at you, do you have the coin to pay our reward?" Bard's voice was steady. "If you'd asked any of the others, I could not have paid you, but I know what you truly want if your aim is the dragon. I can pay, though not necessarily with gold." At first, the dwarves sneered at the idea of lack of coin, but when Bard added that he could pay in something else, every head turned. Thorin's eyes flicked with interest. "Tell me, human, what other payment could you offer?" Bard smiled faintly. "The Black Arrow." The name made an ember of excitement flare in Thorin's gaze. "The Black Arrow? You still have one?" Tarnis's light eyebrows rose. The name stirred memory. Thorin asked, "The kind said to pierce a dragon's scales?" Thorin nodded. "Yes, Smaug would never expect we possessed the Black Arrow. If we gave it to old Mr. Egon—" He cut himself off, composing his anger. "Words mean nothing unless we see proof," Thorin added coldly. "Why should we trust you?" Balin unexpectedly offered his voice. "Perhaps he speaks true." Bard and the others looked at the white-bearded dwarf in surprise. Balin, who had opposed the plan, speaking in the man's favor. Thorin demanded, "Why say that, Balin?" Balin's face went distant with memory. "Lord Girion once purchased weapons from the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain. Among them were several black arrows made for slaying dragons. I handled that transaction. If Bard is Girion's line, it's likely one of those arrows passed down." Bard confirmed, voice tight. "My ancestors bought 3 black arrows. 2 were fired defending River Valley Town. The last was never loosed when Girion fell. It came down to me." Thorin's eyes darkened. "If only your forefather had aimed truer that day." Bard's voice was low and fierce. "If you are Thorin Oakenshield, you should know. The 2 arrows Girion fired struck Smaug and dislodged a scale from his left chest. One more, and the dragon would have fallen." Dwalin scoffed, then laughed low. "That's a tale to warm a hearth. I respect Girion's courage, but I think history differs." Bard waved the argument away. "Not now. Will you take my commission? If my daughters are returned, I will give you the Black Arrow." Thorin considered, then agreed. "We accept, but beyond the Black Arrow, you will pay, let us say, 10 gold coins." Bard's face tightened, but he nodded. 10 I can afford. One condition. My daughters must return to me alive and unharmed." Thorin inclined his head and looked at Tarns. "As long as they breathe, I guarantee they will be returned whole." He signaled to Balin. "Draw up 3 contracts, one for me, one for Bard, and one for Bilbo." Bilbo started, pointing at himself. "Why am I included?" Thorin's voice was matter of fact. "We must find where the girls are kept. A dozen dwarves entering Laketown would be noticed. We need your skill in stealth to scout the places they might be held. This is separate from the Lonely Mountain matter, so you are to be commissioned separately. Pay negotiable." Bilbo thought a moment, then gave a helpless grin. "Very well. I'll go with you. Freeing 2 girls from among men is less perilous than sneaking under a dragon's nose to steal a gem." Contracts were drawn and signed. Tarns looked to Thorin and Bard. "When do we leave?" "The sooner the better," Bard said. "I don't know when Smaug will next feed. If you have no objections, we can set out tonight. I can lead you to the outskirts of Lake Town." Thorin nodded. "Tonight, then.